Chapter 228. Becoming stronger again, she didn't want to return to the days when she was taken advantage of and humiliated. She didn't want to lose her freedom and become a puppet. She desired a part of the world she could call her own, so no one would dare look down on her and humiliate her. She wanted to possess a supreme power that would help her to protect the people who were important to her, and the strength to punish those who would injure her and those she cared about. For such a purpose, she was willing to endure all kinds of suffering torments. As long as she could become stronger by tolerating any kind of suffering in exchange, she wouldn't give in. A violent surge of spiritual power washed over her body and kept flowing all the way through, ultimately gathering in her dantian. Then, her originally vast dantian, at this moment gradually became larger as a tiny whirlpool formed. Hushi's whole body began to slowly emit a multicolored light. On the outside of the inheritance void, the imprint of Zijin's master was leisurely watching the two people who were in the middle of being tested. When he saw Feng Lianing pull out the spirit powder pill and swallow it, a corner of his mouth couldn't help but lift into a sneer. Such a mighty gold core stage martial artist can't actually bear such a test of willpower, while on the contrary, that little girl of foundation establishment stage is better. She clearly isn't aware that this test, although painful, is the best place for gold core stage martial artists to cultivate. TSK. She really doesn't know how to use things to the best of her advantage. After that, his gaze turned to look at Hushi, his brows slightly wrinkling. This little girl's state and willpower is really formidable. It's enough to easily intimidate people. Yet after all, she's only a foundation establishment stage martial artist. I'm afraid that for her to pass this test is perhaps... Suddenly, the imprint of Zijin's master's voice halted, his face a mask of shock. This little girl, what is she doing? In the inheritance void, the multicolored lights from Hushi's body became brighter and brighter, while a tiny vortex began to appear in her dantian. As the vortex spun, the spiritual energy in the inheritance void began to frantically enter Hushi's body. Along with the spiritual energy, her meridians that had barely been tolerating the pain of burning heart and forged body slowly started to restore and become even tougher. Was that even possible? The imprint of Zijin's master exclaimed lightly, and following this, his face broke into a delighted smile. Perhaps, just maybe, this little girl could really create a miracle. In the inheritance void, following the spiritual energy entering Hushi's body, Hushi could feel the pain in her body slowly beginning to decrease and her cultivation base starting to advance once more. Slowly, she went from the middle of foundation establishment stage, advancing to the peak of foundation establishment stage. Moreover, she could feel that after going through this process of burning heart and forged body, her meridians and dantian had become much stronger than before. On top of that, the impurities that had been accumulating because of absorbing too much spiritual energy from foreign sources had also disappeared without a trace. Hushi had become stronger once more. Suddenly, she heard a familiar deep and quiet voice in her ears. Congratulations. Together the both of you have passed the test of burning heart and forged body. Hushi was surprised, and as she opened her eyes, it was to see the scenery before her eyes starting to blur. When she could focus once again, she was startled to find that she now appeared in a refined, simple, and unadorned room. Sitting on an armchair near the front of the room, there was a young man with a graceful mien. He was none other than the imprint of Zijin's master who had been speaking in the inheritance void a moment ago. Standing beside Hushi there was a woman dressed in white, and as soon as Hushi saw her, she frowned slightly. Feng Lianing. So she even entered Zijin Palace too. When Feng Lianing noticed Hushi standing undamaged in front of her, she almost crushed her own teeth due to hatred. This stinky boy, obviously his cultivation base was as low as an ant's, so how could he be so lucky every time? He was even able to survive the pain of burning heart and forged body. Chapter 229. Avoid choking. A trace of killing intent flashed in Feng Lianying's eyes, but quickly disappeared and was replaced by a gentle smile on her face. Young Master Shi, this is such a coincidence. I didn't expect to see you in here. I wonder how young Master Shi was able to find Zijin Palace? Without any expression on her face, Hushi indifferently said, Naturally I have my ways. What does it concern you? Feng Lianing grit her teeth, and she released a soft laugh from her mouth. However, I heard that if it isn't a martial artist of gold core stage or higher that enters the internal core of the secret territory, that they will be torn into pieces. For you to be able to come here, you must have a great ability? Hushi's eyes showed a trace of impatience. However, the Ice Lotus Fairy entered. That was how I entered too. Feng Lianing rolled her eyes, her expression somewhat bashful as she said, "It was Brother Yu who helped me to enter. He started planning this many years ago while waiting for the secret territory to open so we could hunt for treasures. Besides finding the divine treasures he desired, the most important thing he wanted was for me to enter Zijin Palace and receive the inheritance." After saying that, she suddenly paused, then said in a slightly surprised tone, "Young Master Shi, you didn't know about Brother Yu wanting to enter the secret territory? He didn't inform you that we were coming here together?" Hushi's lips flattened, her eyes appearing slightly chilly. Feng Lianing saw the change in his expression, and realizing that it wasn't really Nangongyu who helped him enter, a burst of ecstasy immediately appeared in her eyes. Yet all that was heard from her mouth seemed to be apologies. "I'm really sorry, young Master Shi, that, when I saw that you and Brother Yu were so close, I assumed that your relationship must be very good. Therefore, I thought that Brother Yu surely would have informed you that we were entering the secret territory together. After all, even if a low-level martial artist can't enter the internal core, with the protection of Brother Yu, an average martial artist would be able to obtain some treasures in the outer layer. It's an opportunity that'll only come once in their lifetime. I really didn't expect that Brother Yu didn't actually have any intention to bring you along. He didn't even tell you that he wanted to come to the secret territory. Anyway, Brother Yu also entered the secret territory, so the two of you could run into each other anytime. Or else you can wait until after I receive the inheritance. Then I can ask him for you? Perhaps Brother Yu might be having some difficulties? Don't worry, from childhood until now, Brother Yu has always told me if he has any secrets, I will certainly ask him clearly for you." Feng Lianying's gentle voice was laced with obvious mockery, continuously resounding in Hushi's ears and making her heart irritated, while a biting cold spread throughout her body. The corners of her mouth curled into a cold smile all of a sudden, and her expression as she looked at Feng Lianing morphed into a sneer. "Wait until after you receive the inheritance? Ice Lotus Fairy, isn't there something wrong with your brain? Who said that the person who'll ultimately be receiving the inheritance will be you? Moreover, how I came to the secret territory is my business. That has nothing to do with Nangongyu. Even more, it has nothing to do with you. Do I need you to meddle in my business?" Feng Lianying's expression suddenly sank, then she sneered. "You're merely a foundation establishment stage martial artist. The process of how you got here doesn't matter. However, just because of your luck so far, do you really think that you can compete with me over the inheritance? I advise you, young Master Shi, you should conduct yourself with integrity and not overestimate your capabilities." Hushi laughed quietly, and coming into contact with Feng Lianying's forceful power pressure, she didn't cower in the slightest as she said, "Whether or not it was luck, we'll know once the inheritance trial has ended. Before you boast, Ice Lotus Fairy, it's best you take it easy so that when your words slap your face you avoid choking on your tongue." "You." Feng Lianing was just about to attack, when the imprint of Zijin's master, who had been quiet until now, said, "Though Zijin Palace and my Mahao inheritance will dissipate from this world, along with myself, I never expected that someone would really be able to enter here. Furthermore, it was two people at once." Chapter 230. Relying on one's own ability. Hushi and Feng Lianing shivered for a moment, before their gazes then fell on the imprint of Zijin's master's image. After seeing the true appearance of Zijin's master, Hushi's eyes widened in shock. She hadn't expected that his appearance would be of one so young, or that his whole body would give off the feel of a refined scholar. From what she had heard from the little golden dragon, she had assumed that his master would have been a white-haired old man with a long beard. Someone who would look like a sage. Zijin's master slightly raised his left hand as he smiled and said, "Welcome to my nothingness void. Here is where my inheritance can be received. Unfortunately, my inheritance can only be given to one person, so to determine who will receive my inheritance, The two of you will have to pass 3 tests. The winner. Zijin's master was still speaking. Yet Feng Lianing hurriedly stepped forward and interrupted by respectfully handing over the jade slip in her hand. Your Honor, this is the letter that my master wanted me to give you. My master said as long as you read this letter, that you'll understand and know who to choose. As she was handing over the jade slip, Feng Lianing proudly glanced at Hushi. She had total confidence that as long as Zijin's master read this jade slip, that he would certainly give the inheritance to her. However, who would have thought that he didn't bother taking the jade slip, instead laughing. No need, I know who your master is. Yet accepting you based on that old guy's reputation isn't possible. A pity really, since that old guy's reputation isn't small either. With this being the case, I will not choose who due to another's reputation. Both of you will just have to rely on your own abilities. What? Feng Lianing paled. How could this? However, she hadn't finished speaking when Zijin's master had already waved his sleeve, and suddenly a ray of light rose from the ground, wrapping around each of the 2 girls. When Hushi recovered her senses, she found herself floating in the air with a distant and familiar voice resounding in her ears. Sister, I will protect you. I absolutely won't let them hurt you. Hushi's body suddenly started shaking, and following that, she felt like the world was spinning in front her eyes as a white building abruptly appeared before her. That building was the orphanage where she had lived in her past life, and the scene at this time was in the orphanage's toilet. A thin and weak girl and boy were trapped in the toilet while a few people were continuously kicking them. At the same time, a couple of other people were holding dirty mops and brooms, whacking the faces of the 2 children now and then. The boy's frame was thinner than the girl's, but he unwaveringly shielded the girl behind him. No matter how badly he was beaten, he refused to move out of the way. They forced the boy's head into the toilet bowl as they kept punching and kicking him, excitedly yelling, "Beat these 2 freaks to death!" Watching the boy starting to suffocate from his head being pressed into the toilet bowl, the girl finally snapped, and an intense burst of energy surged out of her body and struck all the scoundrels bullying them. This resulted in them all falling to the ground in an unconscious heap. Half of them seriously injured, the rest of them barely breathing. Hushi was stuck floating in the air as she watched this scene. Stiffly biting her lip, her eyes no longer revealed their usual coldness. They were brimming with anguish and painful memories instead. That little girl was her, and the little boy protecting her with all his might was her biological little brother. After they were sent to the orphanage, because of some extraordinary abilities they had possessed that they were unable to suppress, they were regarded as freaks and often bullied by many of the other children there. At that time, after seeing her brother nearly die before her eyes, the energy within Hushi's body erupted with her fury and shocked the entire orphanage. The scene in front of her changed once again, and as Hushi floated in the air, she watched her little brother go to the dean of the orphanage without her knowing, and admit that the immense energy attack was caused by him. Chapter 231. Memory May. Soon after, her little brother was taken away by a group of mysterious people who secretly sent him to an underground laboratory. When she saw this, Hushi's body began to tremble violently, the pain and anger in her chest surging like a tide. As she floated in the air with a blank stare, she watched as her little brother was pushed into the laboratory. Little by little his body was dissected, his limbs snapped and torn, and his skull scooped clean. Afterwards he was discarded like garbage into a pile of waste. Watching this scene, Hushi felt a fury so destructive that it could destroy heaven and exterminate earth surge up within her, causing her to almost lose her mind and make her wish she could kill all the people in this world. Like a wounded cub, she roared as she charged towards the murderers of her brother in the scene below her feet. However, the scene suddenly changed once again, morphing into the desert prison in ADX. In order to rescue her partner, Lengye, she broke into the prison alone. Yet in exchange for her efforts, Lengye had stabbed a dagger into her chest. Lengye had wanted her for himself, and when he had realized that it wouldn't ever be possible, he decided that if he couldn't have her, no one could, and felt that it was better to kill her. The organization had taken advantage of her, and when they had felt threatened by her, they had decided to kill her. In her past life she was like a chess piece, constantly being manipulated by fate and other people, with no freedom and no way to protect the people she had truly loved. Would she just accept her fate as a chess piece? No. She wasn't willing at all. In this life she wanted to become stronger. Stronger than anyone else, so no one would be able to hurt her. And no one would be able to manipulate her. Hushi suddenly opened her eyes, and before her was the familiar elegant room and Zijin's master's smiling features. Wiping the perspiration off her forehead, her hand felt cold and clammy. Suddenly, she heard Feng Lianying's taunting voice say, "You couldn't even pass such a simple refined heart spell, but you still wish to compete with me over Zijin Palace's inheritance." Hushi glanced briefly at Feng Lianying, and saw her leisurely relaxing. Her manner more fitting to someone who hadn't just been completely trapped in a memory maze. Hence Hushi couldn't help but sneer. Passing the test by relying on spiritual items and therefore cheating. What qualifications do you have to mock me? You. Feng Lianying's face flushed red, but when she looked at the smiling yet pensive look on the face of Zijin's master, she couldn't help but push down her anger as she didn't dare act rashly. She had indeed depended on the spiritual items given to her by her master, so of course she had effortlessly passed the refined heart spell. But how could this stinky boy know that? Zijin's master laughed slightly and said, "No matter how you did it, congratulations to the both of you on passing the first examination. The result of this test was a tie, and now the second test will begin." Feng Lianying was dissatisfied. Obviously she was the first one to exit the memory maze, so why was the result a tie? Yet, before she had a chance to speak, Zijin's master once again flicked out his sleeve. Soon, dozens of porcelain bottles appeared in front of Hushi and Feng Lianying. Apart from the first porcelain bottle being red, these numerous bottles were all the same with no difference, and all of them were decorated with blue and white stripes. Zijin's master laughed faintly. "While the treasure you want to inherit is my Maha inheritance, the greatest pride in my life was my alchemy technique, and it beats the inheritance due to my somewhat unique healing techniques. Therefore, this second test will be testing your medical expertise. In front of each of you there is a red porcelain bottle. In this red bottle there is a highly poisonous medicinal pill called dense viper orchid. This dense viper orchid was something I refined when I was younger. The person who takes this pill, even if it's a nascent soul stage martial artist, will be poisoned within a quarter of an hour. Once poisoned, your body will be covered with scales just like a snake's. But these scales don't grow outward, rather, they grow and spread within your body, until they finally erode your heart and dantian. If you're not cured in the time it takes to burn a stick of incense, then even God can't save you." Chapter 232. The greatest pride to depend on. Feng Lianying sucked in a cold breath, and her face turned an extremely ugly shade. She was well aware of how terrible dense viper orchid was, because even her master had mentioned this poison once before. Nevertheless, with a grave face she glanced at Zijin's master, wondering what he intended bringing out this poison. A sharp glint flashed in Zijin's master's eyes. Then he continued, "What you have to do is take this dense viper orchid, and before you die due to being poisoned, you have to find dense viper orchid's antidote amongst the remaining 30 bottles of medicinal pills. These 30 bottles of medicinal pills contain nearly the exact same attributes as the real antidote, be it color, scent, or accumulation of spiritual power. Apart from the real antidote, none of them have any effect at all, and in case you take them, they will cause the effects of dense viper orchid to accelerate instead. Therefore for this test, it's up to either of you to decide whether or not you want to participate, so you should think it over properly yourselves." Hushi took 2 steps forward, and picking up 2 of the small bottles, she opened the stoppers and sniffed. Sure enough, regardless of the shape, color, or scent, there was no difference. Finding dense viper orchid's antidote wasn't difficult. What was difficult was when this kind of extremely poisonous pill was ingested. As the time limit for taking the antidote approached little by little, with frightening scales slowly appearing in the body, how could any ordinary person still stay calm enough to differentiate which was the antidote? Hushi laughed coldly, and without a single hesitation, she picked up the red medicinal pill bottle, and swallowed a pill instantly. Zijin's master raised an eyebrow with a look of surprise in his eyes. Hushi's courage really made him, who had already lived a millennium, have no choice but to admire her. The moment the dense viper orchid poison reached Hushy's stomach, a distinct red line started to trace down the veins on her arms. Slowly, this red line got longer, extending itself towards her heart. Hushy's expression sharpened with her concentration, and the speed of her hands suddenly became very fast. In the blink of an eye, all 30 blue and white striped bottles were opened, and all of the medicinal pills were poured onto a tray. Then suddenly, a silver needle appeared gripped in one of Hushy's hands. Using the silver needle, she inserted it a little into one of the pills that she had just placed into her mouth, and the scent of spiritual herbs wafted into the air. The smell and spiritual energy properties of most medicines were very similar, so even if a common doctor in Miluo continent used spiritual power to inspect them, they still might not be able to find the real antidote. But Hushy was different. When she differentiated between medicines, she also examined them using a subtle touch and a sense of taste. Although she had tasted all kinds of herbs as a divine doctor in her past life, with this she had to distinguish the 5 elements between the 30 medicinal pills, so it wasn't like it would take no effort at all. Just 3 brief minutes later, Hushy picked up a medicinal pill, a faint smile showing on her face. Seeing that she was about to stuff the pill into her mouth, Zijin's master couldn't help but say, "You still have a lot of time to examine the rest, so there's no need to be so hasty with deciding. If you swallow the wrong pill, it's very possible that you will immediately die from the poison. Have you thought about it properly?" A glint of confidence flashed in Hushy's eyes, then without the slightest hesitation, she swallowed the pill. Showing a reckless smile, she said, "I apologize, I always firmly believe in my medical expertise. Even if you've lived 1,000 years old man, Zijin's master, it's not likely that you'll be able to ever surpass me in medical expertise." This is Hushy's greatest pride that she depended on. As expected, after the medicinal pill entered her stomach, the poison source that had been circling her dantian was instantly neutralized. Zijin's master's face showed disbelief and admiration. His gaze as he looked at Hushy was becoming more and more amiable. Chapter 233. Regardless of life or death, Hushy's gaze indifferently landed upon Feng Lianing. "Ice Lotus Fairy, I've already passed my part of the test. Since it seems that you're reluctant to swallow the medicinal pill, does that mean you're ready to forfeit the inheritance?" "Why would I give up?" Feng Lianing shouted in a frail tone, her whole face flushing a deep red. "Anyway, it's merely differentiating the antidote, that's all. Do you think I'll lose to you?" With that, she poured out a pill from the red bottle. But just as she was going to stuff the pill into her mouth, there was distinct fear in her eyes. This was dense viper orchid. Once it was swallowed, the whole body would be covered with scales, becoming more ugly than a beast's. Hushy saw that Feng Lianing was so scared that her face had turned white, so she couldn't help but shake the empty red bottle held in her hand and leisurely say, "Ice Lotus Fairy, there's no need for you to force yourself. If you don't dare to swallow the pill, then you had better immediately admit defeat." "Who said I don't dare?" Feng Lianing felt her anger surge as she was taunted by Hushy, and without thinking, she swallowed the pill. A red line soon appeared on her fair arm, and like a line of death, it continually spread towards her heart. Feng Lianying's eyes filled with horror, and even her movements of seeking the antidote by opening the white and blue striped bottles became frenzied. This caused the bottles to knock into each other and produce clanking sounds as she searched. As time passed and was about to run out, Feng Lianing still hadn't found the antidote. "Arg. I don't want to become ugly." Feng Lianing looked at the skin on the back of her hand, and finally unable to bear it any longer, she collapsed to the ground. "Save me. Zijin's master, save me." However, Zijin's master had no intention of saving her, and with the same gentle smile on his face as before, he said, "All the tests need to be accomplished by the prospective new owner of the inheritance. Regardless of life or death, it's the responsibility of your own misfortune or good luck, so it's unnecessary for me to save you." Feng Lianing looked at Zijin's master, then looked at Hushy watching indifferently from the side. With a hateful look aimed at the two of them, she grit her teeth till they nearly broke. Eventually, while still clenching her teeth, she fished out a tiny silver-white jade bead that she had kept hidden on her body all this time. Firmly pinching it to crumbs, she then smeared it onto her eyelids. The next moment, Feng Lianying's eyes shined brilliantly, and her weak divine sense suddenly increased. Looking once more at the black pills that she had previously poured out, her eyes soon lit up as she picked up one of them and quickly swallowed it. As soon as the antidote entered her body, the red line and dark patch on her hand disappeared without a trace in a flash. Her dantian that had already started burning quickly restored to its original state, the poison finally cured. Zijin's master laughed faintly, then stood up to say, "Congratulations to the both of you. You both passed the second test once again. However, again, the outcome isn't decided on who will be able to receive the inheritance, so we can only proceed to the third test to see the result." When Hushi heard that, her expression was only indifference. Feng Lianing, on the other hand, tightly massaged her arms, her eyes lowered. During the test a moment ago, she had used the precious bright sense bead that her master had given her. Unfortunately, the bright sense bead was a single-use only item. When it was used against an enemy, it could increase her divine sense to limitless possibilities, increasing her speed and 5 senses. It was a very formidable weapon that could save one's life, but today, she had unexpectedly used it in such a place. Moreover, just because she was too late in detoxifying the poison, while most of the scales on her skin had disappeared, she now had a black mark remaining on her left arm. Feng Lianing had always been beautiful, yet now she had such an ugly mark on her flawless left wrist. How could she be willing to accept this? Chapter 234. Life Spirit Beast Qingsha Shiyu. All of this was caused by that bastard, Shiyu. Just wait until she received the inheritance. When she departed Zijin Palace, she would definitely dismember his body into pieces. Zijin's master was in high spirits as he observed the reaction of the two people. Then slightly flinging out his sleeve, the scene before their eyes immediately changed. Suddenly, they appeared in an expansive garden, and crouching in the middle of the garden there was a huge ferocious beast the size of a small hill. This ferocious beast's physique was somewhat similar to a bear's, but its face resembled a dog's. At this moment, it was half lying on the ground, appearing a bit comical. When Zijin's master saw this ferocious beast, his face became gentle, and he walked up to the ferocious beast. Reaching out his hand, he stroked its fur as he said, "This is a life spirit beast that I subdued in Miluo continent when I was younger, Qingsha. He is also one of my most important companions. Your third test is to make Qingsha acknowledge you. Whoever can gain Qingsha's approval can become the owner of Zijin Palace." As if responding to Zijin's master's words, Qingsha quickly poked Zijin's master with its big head, acting all coquettish and clingy. Standing on the side, Feng Lianying's gloomy face finally revealed a smile. Taking a step forward with confidence, she laughed gracefully before asking, "Zijin's master, this time can you let me try first?" Zijin's master nodded. "You may." Feng Lianying leisurely moved forward, and as she passed beside Hushi, her steps suddenly halted, the corner of her mouth lifting into a strange smile. "May I ask Zijin's master if I'm able to tame this spirit beast? Doesn't that mean that I would immediately become the inheritor of the inheritance?" Zijin's master was slightly startled for a moment, a glint of light flashing across his eyes. He then smiled as he nodded. "Exactly. Qingsha will only recognize one master, so no matter who gets the recognition of Qingsha, that person will receive the inheritance." After hearing that, the smile on Feng Lianying's face immediately became brilliant and proud. Then she turned to Hushi and faintly said, "Young Master Shi, it wasn't easy for you to come here, but unfortunately, the conclusion will disappoint you. I will certainly become the inheritor of Zijin Palace. After all, Brother Yu is still eagerly awaiting my good news." After that, without waiting for Hushi to respond, Feng Lianying's figure flashed as she floated like a fairy and landed in front of the spirit beast, Qingsha. Feng Lianying wasn't acting blindly, she had genuine confidence in herself. Her reputation in Miluo continent as the young clan head of the Luli sect, with the title of Ice Lotus Fairy and mid-level member of the Doctor Association, had spread far and wide. But few people knew that she, Feng Lianying, was also a master beast tamer. Relying on her own strength, she had already formed contracts with 3 spirit beasts, all of them quite highly ranked. Being presented with this third test, it was just like it was custom made for herself. What reason would there be for her to not win? Feng Lianing faintly laughed, and slightly lifting her still spotlessly fair wrist, an exquisite little silver bell soon appeared in front of her. As her delicate hand gently swung the little bell, a melodious and beautiful tinkling sound could be heard. Seeing this bell, Zijin's master couldn't help but look up with the hint of an interested smile. The yin and yang bell, that's rather interesting. That old man really gave any spiritual item to his treasured disciple. The bell's ringing didn't cause any reaction at first, but after a while, Qingsha's eyes lost their focus and became somewhat vague. Seeing this happen, Feng Lianing was overjoyed and swayed the little bell in her hand faster. As the tempo became faster and more coherent, the bell tones came together and formed a slightly queer melody. Chapter 235. The risk of being bitten back. As Hushi watched, Qingsha's eyes slowly changed from being unable to focus to lifeless and dull. Then, with involuntary movements, it step-by-step walked towards the direction of Feng Lianing. Watching the unfocused and uncontrolled state of Qingsha, Hushi's eyebrows creased. If she hadn't guessed wrongly, Feng Lianing was using an enchantment technique. Moreover, if this technique was used on a low-level spirit beast, it would damage the spirit beast's divine sense, resulting in it becoming a puppet that had no choice but to obey all orders. It could be said that spirit beasts that had been tamed this way hadn't properly made a contract with their master, and instead, they were just a mere tool being controlled. As Qingsha's eyes continued to lose their focus, it had slowly walked in front of Feng Lianing, following her order of crawling on the ground. A glint of excitement flashed in Feng Lianing's eyes, and her hand continuously shook the bell. Gently extending her other hand, she placed it on top of Qingsha's head, slowly releasing her new level of spiritual power and wrapping it around its head. Not a moment later, Qingsha's eyes slowly started to focus, but it had become very meek, as if it was only a house dog crouching before Feng Lianing. Successfully tamed, Feng Lianing was no longer able to suppress the proud look on her face. As she stopped shaking the bell in her hand, she took a step forward, towards Zijin's master, and bowed. Zijin's master, luckily I didn't fail to accomplish this test. I've tamed Qingsha. However, there was no change to the expression on the face of Zijin's master, except for a corner of his mouth lifting into a meaningful smile. Oh, are you sure? Feng Lianing stared blankly for a moment, and just as she was about to ask him what his words meant, her complexion suddenly changed. Qingsha, who had up until this moment been completely meek, abruptly released a snarl, a burst of formidable spiritual pressure exploding from its entire body. This kind of spiritual pressure far surpassed what a gold core stage martial artist could take, and Feng Lianing was caught completely off guard, directly struck by that spiritual pressure. Combining this with the effort she had used for the enchantment technique, and she was too powerless and ended up spitting out a mouthful of blood, before her entire body then fell weakly to the ground. Raising her head, she looked at Qingsha, who had snarled at her in disbelief, murmuring, "How could this be possible? My method for taming beasts, how could it fail?" A glint of ridicule flashed within the eyes of Zijin's master as he replied, "Oh, I forgot to warn you too. Being threatened and forced are the things that my Qingsha loathes the most. You have to make him want to recognize you. For example, you have to make him willing to do it. Otherwise, you have to bear the risk of being bitten back." After hearing that, Feng Lianying's complexion paled further, her heart brimming with unwillingness and resentment since she had failed the final test. However, just thinking that if she couldn't do it, then it would be near impossible for that stinky boy to accomplish it. With that thought in her mind, her heart felt a little better. As long as he couldn't do it, then the result would be a draw and she would still have a chance. She was determined to win Zijin Palace's inheritance. After Zijin's master finished warning the two of them, he looked at the current ferocious appearance of his spirit beast, and couldn't help but shake his head. Qingsha is now in a bad mood, its temperament will be more violent than usual. I'm afraid that if you still want to tame it, that it will be extremely difficult. Hushi crossed her arms as she examined this huge spirit beast growling angrily, pondering how she was going to make it submit to her. She was different to the martial artists of this world. As in regards to spirit beasts, her concept of them from the beginning was limited to her adorable Dandan and that smelly little golden dragon. As for how to subdue ordinary spirit beasts, she really had no idea at all. However, seeing this spirit beast with a head like a dog and a body similar of that to a bear's, Hushi suddenly remembered the wild animals of her past life. How would she have gotten a wild animal to be obedient back then? At least, obedient in the shortest amount of time? After thinking about it for a while, Hushi's eyes suddenly lit up. Then, she slowly strode towards Qingsha, but when Qingsha saw someone approaching it, it suddenly raised its body up from its crouched position. With its mouth wide open like a sacrificial bull, it released a warning snarl, as if in the next moment it would swallow Hushi whole. Chapter 236. Gluttonous nature. With such a scene before her, Hushi wasn't afraid in the slightest. Instead, she extended her hand to lightly touch the tip of Qingsha's tongue as it poked out from its huge mouth. In the next moment, the thing that made Feng Lianing and Zijin's master stupefied occurred. The spirit beast that had been looking like a monster with bared fangs suddenly quieted down. It even smacked its lips while revealing an expression of joy. Zijin's master was stunned. Yet when he saw something sparkling flash within Hushi's palm, he chuckled wryly. So it was like that. That girl unexpectedly used that method to tame his Qingsha. That girl was simply too clever. Now that the fierce and terrifying looks Qingsha had been making a moment ago were no more, it was currently behaving like a real pet dog, incessantly rubbing against Hushi with eager and expectant expressions. Then, Hushi turned her wrist, and soon a piece of cake dropped onto her palm, the cake emitting rich spiritual energy along with a sweet smell. This wasn't just an ordinary piece of cake, but rather, she had produced this cake after mixing in a small amount of spirit water and basing it on the cheesecake recipes from her past life. She had known that the spirit beasts of this world had preferences similar to that of humans, and furthermore, that many spirit beasts liked honey desserts. Although she didn't know how to tame spirit beasts, she did know that it was common to have a gluttonous nature in this world. Without mentioning spirit beasts, even intellectual people like Nangong Yu found the deliciousness of the superb cake on Hushi's hand hard to resist. Everyone watching fell into an unspeakable silence. So when Feng Lianing saw Qingsha rubbing against Hushi with its big head, she couldn't believe her eyes. She had relied on her skills as a master beast tamer, and the secret treasure, the yin and yang bell given to her by her master, to help her. Unfortunately, even she was unable to tame the spirit beast. Yet to her surprise, under this stinky boy, she used hands, it had become so obedient. How could this be possible? That brat must have used some shameful method and cheated. That must be it. Zijin's master quickly recovered, then faintly laughed before he said, "The outcome of the third test has been decided. Little boy, I congratulate you on receiving my Maha inheritance." A corner of Hushi's mouth curled up into a meaningful smile, but before she even had time to speak, Feng Lianing started screaming out of control. "This is impossible. I don't believe that he was able to tame Qingsha. Even I, a gold core stage master beast tamer, was unable to subdue that ferocious beast, so how could he, mere trash on Qi refining stage, have been able to subdue it? I'm sure he must have used some sort of shameful trick. Zijin's master, you're a wise person, so by all means you shouldn't be deceived by him." A trace of contempt rapidly flashed within the eyes of Zijin's master, but the expression on his face didn't change in the slightest as he indifferently said, "During this third test, the one who relied on their own ability, and the one who cheated, I indeed saw it all clearly. When you used a spirit powder pill to avoid feeling the pain of burning heart and forged body, I didn't interfere and allowed you to pass. Do you really think that I knew nothing about your little tricks? That's different." Feng Lianing shouted quietly, but then the complexion on her face darkened into an ugly shade of red. What Zijin's master said wasn't wrong. If she could use small tricks to pass the tests, then why couldn't that stinky boy? She had cheated her way through all of the tests, so what qualifications did she have to accuse him? But for the purpose of obtaining this inheritance, How many years had they, the Luli sect, been preparing? How much of their strength and their resources had they spent? Even her master had given her precious treasures over, even though she normally guarded them carefully. And when she had done so, she had repeatedly told Feng Lianying that she must receive the inheritance. Chapter 237. Spiritual sense now. With such an outcome, how could she be willing to accept it? Feng Lianying grit her teeth, and after aiming a look of resentment towards Hushi, she then turned her gloomy and cold gaze towards Zijin's master. Zijin's master, are you really disregarding the old kindness of my family head, and giving Zijin Palace's inheritance to this stinky brat? Don't forget, his cultivation base is merely on qi refining stage, and moreover, he is insupportable and has no foundations. Plus, he has no family background, so when the time comes that people under heaven know about the matter of him receiving the inheritance, he might even be unable to keep his small life. Zijin's master, aren't you worried that your inheritance might cease to exist in his hands? Not waiting for Zijin's master to reply, Feng Lianying raised her chin in arrogance and continued, but with my Luli sect it's different. If the inheritance is in my hands, I can ensure I'll make the best use of it. With the power and influence of my Luli sect, who in this land would dare to covet it? On top of this, my family head will owe you a big favor as well. Such a result has many advantages, without disadvantages, for Zijin's master. Hence, Zijin's master, you really won't consider it once again? Finished saying these words, Feng Lianying's confidence was brimming. She believed that as long as people had a brain, they would know how to choose. This stinky brat Shiyu's cultivation base was low, he had a lowly status, and except for his good luck in passing the 3 rounds of assessments, what else did he have? However, contrary to what Feng Lianying expected, after Zijin's master heard her speech, a glint of coldness flashed within his eyes as sharp as a blade. Then suddenly, a burst of icy cold power pressure erupted from his body. It seems that I've forgotten to tell you, I'm the same as Qing Sha, and one of the things I loathe the most is when other people threaten me. Your skills are inferior, you lost the competition, and in spite of everything, you still dare to talk nonsense in here. You're overestimating your capabilities. Considering your master's face, I'll spare your life today, but right now, I want you to immediately leave this inheritance void. Don't let me see you again. His words had barely fallen when Feng Lianying felt a sharp pain throughout her entire body, and in the blink of an eye, she sank into darkness. Feng Lianying's figure gradually dissipated, leaving only Hushi and Zijin's master in the inheritance void. The body of Zijin's master then slowly floated upwards in the void, his deep and low voice resonating as if it was being projected from the horizon. Little girl, are you ready to receive the inheritance? Hushi nodded, her expression showing rare respectfulness. Many thanks to Senior for bestowing such a generous gift. The face of Zijin's master showed the traces of a satisfied smile, and the next moment, he and Qing Sha's figures suddenly exploded into blinding white lights. The white lights scattered in all directions, the sight resembling fireworks blooming from afar. Then these lights rapidly shot towards Hushi, drilling into her mind and body. Hushi uttered a muffled groan as she felt a strange energy incessantly surging and circulating within her body, which then slowly converged around her dantian. And in her mind an avalanche of information began to appear, along with the words from Zijin's master. Little girl, in this secret territory, Qing Sha and I were only the remaining wisps of spiritual sense. And only by obtaining a spiritual sense, are you then able to open the divine key and practice the methods of my Zijin technique, the Maha inheritance, to your heart's content. After you've completed the acceptance of the inheritance, Zijin Palace will disappear, and you will become the new owner of this secret territory. However, if you genuinely want to control the secret territory, you still need to do a lot of things. Hushi's brows creased. Zijin's master had said that she would become the new owner of the secret territory, but he didn't actually say how she would control the secret territory, right? Does this mean that she would have to explore the entire secret territory? Currently, the secret territory was crawling with gold core stage and above martial artists. Moreover, there were many dangerous places with layer upon layer of protection, causing Hushi to feel her scalp become numb. If she wanted to explore the secret territory with her current strength, it would be even harder than reaching the sky. Chapter 238. Feng Lianying's jealousy. However, when Hushi heard Zijin's master talking about the contents of the Mahao inheritance, she immediately tossed her concerns about the rest of the matters to the back of her mind. This then left only excitement and expectations in her heart. The ability of the Mahao inheritance was apparently duplication. The power to duplicate other people's abilities, and even their cultivation methods. Of course, in the early stages it was impossible to have such a large ability. At most it could only duplicate the abilities of a martial artist at a lower cultivation level than herself. However, when it reached peak level, there was an 80% probability that it could completely duplicate the cultivation methods of a martial artist that was one level higher than herself, a 50% chance that it would duplicate the cultivation method of a martial artist 2 levels higher than herself, and a 10% chance that it would duplicate the cultivation method of a martial artist 3 levels higher than herself. Moreover, once the divine key was opened, the martial artist's spiritual sense and essence power would be greatly enhanced, helping her to rapidly master any cultivation methods to advance. As a result, her progress would be more than twice as fast as other martial artists. Hushi pushed down the exclamation that surged forth in her heart, and sitting cross-legged, she began to slowly refine and link up the spiritual sense Zijin's master had left for her in the inheritance void. Only through absorbing the spiritual sense could the divine key be opened, and this could then be considered as completely receiving the inheritance. By then, her strength would also greatly improve. And at this moment, on the outside of the inheritance void, Feng Lianing, who had suffered from Qingsha's bite and the forced banishment of Zijin's master, slowly woke up with her complexion an ugly shade. Straight after she awoke, she then spat out a mouthful of blood, her pretty face pale and unhealthy looking. Reaching into a pocket of her robes, she fished out a jade tablet that immediately started emitting a faint light. When Zijin's master had expelled her from the inheritance void, he had used quite a lot of power. He had initially hoped that she would be incapacitated for about an hour, giving Hushi plenty of time to finish receiving the inheritance. However, Zijin's master didn't foresee that Feng Lianying would have actually brought a wind seal with her. With that kind of treasure on her, it would allow her to become clear-headed in just a short half an hour. Feng Lianying's delicate hand tightly clenched the jade tablet, revealing traces of the veins on the back of her hand. She's awake. But so what? In the end, she didn't get Zijin Palace's inheritance. She lost to that stinky brat. She had spent so much to get to this point, yet stumbled on the final hurdle. How would she explain this to everyone in the Luli sect, and even more, explain it to her master? Feng Lianing raised her head. Seeing Hushi sitting cross-legged in meditation in front of her, an intense jealousy and murderous rage suddenly lit up within her eyes. Abruptly standing up, she then pulled out her long sword and engulfed it in a blazing flame. All of this was because of that bastard. He had brought trouble to her by causing her to lose the inheritance, which would result in her losing face when she returned to her sect. Today, even if she had to risk being banished from the secret territory by Zijin's master, she must kill this wretched boy. The sword lit up, and like lightning, it shot forth towards the clueless and unaware figure of Hushi. She had thought that this lad's body would be stabbed by the sword, and furthermore, he would be burnt to ashes by the flame. However, the blood-splattering display that she had expected to see didn't actually happen, and instead, Feng Lianing heard a bang, and her long sword was unexpectedly blocked by a golden barrier. Feng Lianing was startled, and soon heard the rage-filled voice of Zijin's master say, "I told you before, it's forbidden to use violence within Zijin Palace. Why are you still here? Quickly get lost, otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite." Zijin Palace started shaking following the command of Zijin's master, seeming to express his wrath. Feng Lianying's hand holding the sword couldn't help but tremble, while her face revealed the mixed emotions of unwillingness, jealousy, anger and resentment. This made her previously beautiful face become twisted with a sort of sinister maliciousness. Chapter 239. You cannot harm my mother under Hushy's clothes. The little golden dragon was a bundle of nerves as he stealthily watched Feng Lianying's reactions. At the same time, he was also trying to appease Dandan and pushing away his small claws. Even though she was clearly unwilling, they watched as Feng Lianying carried her sword with her as she walked out of Zijin Palace, causing the little golden dragon to finally heave a long sigh of relief. Then, turning towards Dandan with a proud smile, his mouth noisily opened and closed as he said, "See, I told you that I could handle that evil woman." However, the little golden dragon had yet to finish speaking, when Dandan suddenly cried out in alarm, and his pale pink body abruptly swelled as blinding lights burst from his body. The next moment, a bang echoed throughout the room, and the two little spirit pets flew out from under Hushy's clothes to land heavily fell upon the ground. Dandan uttered a painful wail, and his swollen body deflated at a speed faster than the naked eye could follow, becoming smaller and smaller. His pig appearance seemed to have lost all moisture, and his soft skin was no longer as shiny and smooth as before. Rather, it was now all wrinkled, as if completely dried out. "Dandan, are you okay?" The little golden dragon cried out in fear, shock and terror clearly written across his face. This foolish little pig, in order to protect him. I had thought that it was truly an order from Zijin's master. Yet as it turns out, it was only two cunning little beasts. I was almost deceived by the two of you. When the little golden dragon heard that, he raised his small head and furiously said, "My master has already begun the process of receiving the inheritance of Zijin Palace, which means that he will soon become the owner of this secret territory. The younger family member of Zijin's master. If you dare harm my master, be careful because Zijin's master will definitely seek you out to pay back your debt." Upon hearing that, Feng Lianying burst into a fit of laughter. "Since you said that the acceptance has just began, then that means it's not yet complete. If I kill him now, he's not a descendant of Zijin's master, so naturally no one will take revenge on behalf of him. What's more, can it be that you really think my Luli sect is afraid of Zijin's master?" After saying that, the look on her face suddenly became fierce and she gloomily said, "If I can't receive the inheritance, then I won't let others receive it either." With that remark, her figure flashed as she charged straight towards Hushy cloaked in an intense murderous aura. "Mother!" Dandan cried out loudly, and without thinking, his figure once again swelled as he pounced over before Hushy. "You cannot harm my mother." The power of a gold core stage martial artist's sword was very formidable, and Dandan was merely a newborn primary spirit. How could he withstand it? When the sword pierced his body, Dandan let out a shrill scream, and in a flash he fell into Hushy's arms as he spat out a mouthful of blood. His previous pink skin was now nearly completely covered in wrinkles and lifelessly dull. It was as if he would shatter into a million pieces at any time. But the next moment, Dandan shockingly grew even larger to protect Hushy. His voice was brimming with fear and tears, but it also carried stubbornness and the strong conviction of one prepared to sacrifice their life for their beliefs as he said, "You cannot harm my mother. Mother, don't be afraid, Dandan will certainly protect you." Feng Lianying withdrew her long sword, and as her towering figure looked down at the little pig who was firmly protecting Hushy, she sneered in contempt. "Based on what abilities do you want to block me? Such nonsense. Well, since you're so anxious to court death, then I shall kill you and your master." "Little foolish pig, are you insane? Hurry up and run away. She's a gold core stage martial artist. How could you be her opponent? If you continue like this you'll die." Dandan firmly shook his head, stubbornness and persistence showing on his face. Mother is the best mother in this world. Dandan will absolutely not abandon mother to run away. If you're afraid, then you can go. Chapter 240. Dying. How could I be afraid? When the little golden dragon heard the last sentence, he stomped in anger as he scolded. "Who said I would ran away? I only wanted to deceive that shameful woman, that's all. You're merely a gold core stage martial artist. Do you really think that I'm afraid of you?" Upon saying that, the little golden dragon leaped in front of Dandan and started to curse as he faced Feng Lianying. "You're such a venomous-hearted woman. I'm not saying your looks are ugly, but that your heart is so vicious. It's no wonder that Zijin's master doesn't give you the inheritance. Take a look at my master. In comparison to your looks, his are more beautiful than yours, and his ability is higher than yours. Which idiot would choose you, an ugly woman, over my master instead?" Standing behind the little golden dragon, Dandan promptly joined in with, exactly, such an ugly woman. She can't even compare to one of mother's fingertips. Cross-eyed, hooked nose, toady face, and ugly looks with a vicious heart. Be careful in the future. When you give birth to a son, he won't have a butthole, and after you die, you'll go straight down to the 18 levels of hell. Since Dandan had still been inside his huge egg from the beginning, his knowledge was now incomplete. Each of his owners had had different personalities, so naturally he received all different kinds of information, including some things that were weird. Now that he was angry and worried, he spat out the most vulgar curse words that he had learnt. If Hushi was awake at this moment, and could hear her cute and clumsy spirit pet cursing, and shouting at people like a wife in the street, she would certainly be so shocked that her jaw would drop to the floor. On the other hand, when the little golden dragon heard those curses, he loudly cheered. Then, looking at Dandan as if he himself had taught him, he continued adding insults. "Little foolish pig, some of your phrases were wrong. This woman is so ugly that whoever marries her will have bad luck, so how would anyone be willing to marry her? Since no one will marry her, how could she give birth to a son without a butthole?" Feng Lianing was born noble, surrounded by people who flattered her, fawned upon her, and who were always trying to curry favor with her. From since she was a child up until now, she had never suffered such insults and abuse. At this moment, she only felt her chi and blood boiling, her face clearly showing murderous intent. "Two lowly beasts actually dared to insult me so much, very good. Today, I'll skin you both alive, slowly pull your tendons out one by one, and dismember your bodies piece by piece. You'll then be reunited with your master in the underworld." As Feng Lianying's words left her mouth, a fireball condensed in her hand, before she then fiercely threw it towards them. In a flash, the fireball transformed into several sharp arrows, all of them heading towards Hushi, Dandan, and the little golden dragon. "We can't let her hurt Mother," Dandan shouted loudly, immediately making his body swell large again to protect Hushi. The little golden dragon's complexion paled. He was more knowledgeable than Dandan, and therefore he knew just how terrible one strike from a gold core martial artist was. However, when he looked at the foolish pig behind him, completely disregarding his own life, the little golden dragon clenched his teeth, and the golden light surrounding his body suddenly exploded. Boom! An earth-shattering noise was heard that caused Zijin Palace to shake, as if a major disaster had befallen them all. After the sound of the explosion quieted down, the little golden dragon fell to the ground and spat out a mouthful of blood as he slowly started to faint. At this moment, a large area of his dragon scales were burnt, the horns on top of his head were broken, and his entire body was covered with blood and ghastly wounds. The little amount of energy that he had previously managed to collect with great difficulty after becoming unsealed was now completely used up. Dandan started crying after seeing such a miserable appearance, and his body rapidly shrunk back to normal size as he went to the little golden dragon's side. Long Long, are you alright? Why don't die? Little foolish pig. The little golden dragon spat out another mouthful of blood and foam, baring his teeth as he said, "Don't you know who I am? How can I die so easily?" He was unable to finish what he was saying before he fainted, the golden light around his body fading without a trace. Chapter 241. The shopkeeper of Shengda Hall. Feng Lianing sneered. "You're a young dragon that's not much better than a snake. Even the low-level disciples of my Luli sect might be able to catch you as a pet. And yet here you are, daring to be so arrogant in front of me. Don't overestimate your capabilities and attempt something impossible. As far as a useless spirit pet goes, you're the most useless. Since you were so devoted in protecting him, then I'll help you all die together." Upon saying that, her long sword suddenly lit up with a blinding red light, and was surrounded by leaping flames, as if it was about to burn all of Zijin Palace down. Fear and sadness clearly showed on Dandan's face. But in the next moment, He resolutely clenched his jaw and leaped into the air, firmly wrapping himself around Hushi. He had experienced thousands of years of waiting and loneliness before he had finally managed to meet Mother. Mother was so gentle, so kind. She made so many delicious types of food for him, and she would even hug him to appease him. If he lost Mother, then would he have to return to that boundless darkness, where there was no longer any food, no light, and no more of Mother's hugs to warm him? No. He didn't want that to happen. As long as he could be together with Mother, even if he had to pay any price, he would do it without any hesitation. Dandan's body grew bigger and bigger, and the spiritual power in his body started surging violently, forming into a faint spiritual power vortex. Next, the long sword enveloped in blazing flames issued an ear-piercing buzzing as it was aimed straight at the two spirit pets. Dandan's eyes filled with determination, and he recklessly launched the spiritual vortex. But suddenly, a refreshing screen of water appeared before their eyes. During a moment of life or death, it had unexpectedly blocked that whizzing long sword and its blazing flames. Feng Lianying's complexion became extremely unsightly, and she asked in a dark voice, "Who is it? Come out here now." Her words had barely fallen when the door of Zijin Palace was slowly pushed open, and a man dressed in a black robe entered the palace holding a wooden protection tablet in his outstretched hands. The man's looks were scholarly and ordinary, while his voice when speaking carried a refined and amiable tone. "Ice Lotus Fairy, your reputation is well known, and your Luli sect is a dignified and large sect. By taking advantage of such a precarious position and mounting an attack on a member of the younger generation, it wouldn't be good if it were to spread outside, right?" When she clearly saw the man's face, Feng Lianying's expression showed a hint of disgust in a flash. "I was wondering who was it, and as it turns out, it's actually shopkeeper Zhou of Shengda Hall. You're merely trash who depended on medicinal pills to forcefully accumulate enough spiritual power to reach gold core stage. And yet you dare to meddle in this fairy's business. Just who do you think you are?" The person who had come was Zhou Yenin, a second-ranked doctor and shopkeeper of Shengda Hall that Hushi became acquainted with when she was rescuing Xiaoli's brother. Zhou Yenin quickly walked over to stand before Hushi, and Zijin Palace's door slowly shut behind him. Inhaling a deep breath, he said, "The people in this world have a duty to meddle in affairs that have nothing to do with them if someone is about to be hurt. Furthermore, this is young Master Shi, who this humble one happens to be acquainted with. Hence, no matter what, this humble one can't just sit back and watch him die by your hands." Feng Lianying's words were laced with contempt as she sneered. "If those words were said to me by your master, Gulu Feng, I might have shown some fear, but since it was you, you have no qualifications to talk to me like that." Finished speaking, Feng Lianing brandished the long sword in her hand once more, and ruthlessly shot towards Zhou Yenin. With a bang, a water mist rose into the air and blocked Feng Lianying's strike. However, this time the water barrier vibrated extremely hard, like it was only just managing to withstand the attack and resist shattering into pieces. Feng Lianing retrieved the long sword, and seeing the wooden protection tablet still in Zhou Yenin's hands emitting a faint silvery light, she sneered. "You think that such a lousy protection tablet could block my attack? Dream on." Chapter 242, unable to contend like she had thought of something, Feng Lianying's jealous-filled gaze swept over towards Hushi and she gloomily said, "Since shopkeeper Zhou came here, it was presumably to also receive the inheritance of Zijin Palace, right? However, this palace has now been taken away by that stinky boy using his despicable methods. Shopkeeper Zhou, didn't you want to get the inheritance?" Upon hearing this, shopkeeper Zhou stared blankly, before then glancing in disbelief at the boy meditating with his eyes closed. Young master once said that if one wants to receive Zijin Palace's inheritance, that they must at least be a martial artist of gold core stage or higher, and moreover, they need to have a certain level of medical expertise. Young master Shi's cultivation base was clearly just Chi refining stage, but unexpectedly he was able to get the inheritance. Could it be that his medical expertise is really so high that it's reached perfection? When Dandan heard Feng Lianing slandering Hushi, he angrily shouted, "Evil woman who won't ever be able to be married off, It was obviously because your skills weren't as good as Mother's that you lost. And Zijin's master even said that you were inferior to Mother. With your venomous heart you were jealous of Mother, and thus you wanted to take advantage and kill her when she's in the process of receiving the inheritance. Such a vile person. Shameful and malicious people like you will absolutely not have a good ending. Zhou Yan'an was baffled. Young master, she was a man, yet his spirit pet called him Mother. At the same time, Feng Lianing on the opposite side was angered so much that she trembled all over. As she glared at Dandan and Hushi, it was clear that she wanted to mince them up into meat patties. Zhou Yan'an, you better get out of here if you know what's good for you, or else I will kill you together with them. As her words fell, a formidable and imposing spiritual pressure burst out from Feng Lianying's body, tightly wrapping itself around Zhou Yan'an and Dandan. Zhou Yan'an instantly turned deathly pale, causing him to fall back a step. The light of the wooden protection tablet in his hand seemed to dim slightly. His eyes expressed his dread and panic. It's precisely as the Ice Lotus Fairy had said. He had depended on medicinal pills given to him by his young master to help him forcibly accumulate enough spiritual power to raise his cultivation base to gold core stage. And it was all done for the purpose of entering the secret territory and obtaining Zijin Palace's inheritance. His strength simply wouldn't be able to contend with the woman's before his eyes, so the wisest choice was to leave. However, Zhou Yan'an turned his head back and caught a glimpse of Hushi. The youngster's long eyelashes were resting gently on soft, round cheeks, while his exquisite skin was sparkling and translucent. It was like this person was carved out of white jade, exceptionally beautiful and delicate. An image of this youth rescuing that boy emerged before his eyes. He was radiant and glorious, as if any incurable disease in this world could easily be solved by his hands. If it was him, perhaps he could really cure. It wasn't certain, but maybe. If it was him, perhaps he would have more confidence than himself, and be more successful in accomplishing a miracle. With these thoughts, Zhou Yan'an clenched his jaw, his face showing obvious determination. Ice Lotus Fairy, I'm a person who learned medicine, and we medical practitioners have benevolent hearts and are charitable in our deeds as a fundamental rule. With your conduct of willfully killing a teenager because of hate and jealousy, you don't deserve the title of doctor. Today, this humble one finally knows that the Ice Lotus Fairy, who was originally rumored to be as spotless as jade, with the heart of a bodhisattva, was nowhere near as good as she was made out to be. Good, very good. Since you yourself want to court death, then don't blame me for being merciless. Zhou Yan'an's remark was more refined than Dandan's, but the meaning still caused Feng Lianing to become furiously angry. With bloodshot eyes, the muscles on her face slightly trembled because of jealousy and hatred, turning her previously beautiful face into something sinister and distorted. This appearance completely replaced her usually irreproachable image. If it was the normal Feng Lianing, then no matter how much she hated a person, she would have perfectly controlled her temperament and maintained her graceful appearance. Chapter 243. Advancing to Meridian stage. But today, with her fail in competing over Zijin Palace's inheritance, the hatred she had for Hushi made her extremely irritated. All this, coupled with Dandan, the little golden dragon, and Zhou Yan'an's words on top of that, it made her completely lose all rational, and she was unable to maintain her fairy-like image. Zhou Yan'an's strength could in no way contend with Feng Lianying's power, and as a result, after just a few short fights, he fell into a disadvantageous position, his body sustaining a few wounds. Watching from the side, Dandan suddenly jumped over in an attempt to distract Feng Lianing and assist Zhou Yan'an, but Feng Lianing ruthlessly kicked him away with a burst of spare spiritual power. This caused him to smash into Hushi's body so hard that he ended up spitting out a mouthful of blood. Feng Lianing pointed the edge of her blazing sword at Zhou Yan'an, severely striking him. With a bam, the wooden protection tablet in Zhou Yan'an's hand shattered into pieces, after which he staggered before tumbling to the ground, his complexion deathly pale. This wooden protection tablet was a spiritual item given to him by his young master, and it was able to resist the full strength of an attack from a martial artist at the peak of gold core stage. Zhou Yan'an had been able to avoid so many of Feng Lianying's attacks so far because of this protection tablet. Now that the protection tablet was broken, and the spiritual power in his body had been used up to the last drop, he could no longer withstand another blow from Feng Lianying. A cold and malicious expression was clearly visible on Feng Lianying's face. Whether it was Zhou Yan'an, the two little beasts, or Hushi, she absolutely wouldn't allow them to live. In this world, any person who dared to humiliate her would pay the price 1,000 times over, and they wouldn't be allowed to die a natural death. However, since Feng Lianying was immersed in her hatred, while Zhou Yan'an was focused on her and his despair, neither of them noticed what was currently happening with Hushi. As she sat silent and cross-legged to the side, her body began to emit a faint silver light. Dandan raised his small head, and his big eyes welled with tears as he looked at Hushi with a surprised expression. Mother! Along with the light slowly getting brighter, at a rate faster than the eye could see, Hushi's spiritual power started to frantically increase. A tiny whirlpool formed in her dantian, and little by little, it started absorbing the spiritual energy from Zijin Palace into her body. Next, Hushi's cultivation base rose from the peak of Foundation Establishment stage to the completion of Foundation Establishment stage, all the way up to Meridian stage. Finally, she stopped advancing once she reached the second rank of Meridian stage. It must be known that in Miluo continent, a martial artist's rank was categorized and divided into Qi refining stage, Foundation Establishment stage, Meridian stage, Gold Core stage, Nascent Soul stage, Divine stage, Void and Darkness stage, Overcoming Tribulation stage, and lastly, Completeness stage. The higher the rank a martial artist reached, the harder advancing would become. It would be as if one was ascending to heaven. For a martial artist with ordinary innate talents, advancing from Foundation Establishment stage to Meridian stage would take at least several decades. Even a genius martial artist with outstanding innate talents would need at least 5 to 6 years. But Hushi had unexpectedly, in just one short month, managed to jump to the second rank of Meridian stage without a cultivation base. If such an advancement speed were to spread out, it would absolutely shake the entire Miluo continent to its core. With the silver light slowly dissipating, it ultimately seemed that everything had completely entered Hushi's body. Next, the eyelashes of the youngster slowly trembled as he sat cross-legged, and he slowly opened his eyes. This scene was stunning, yet it all happened within the blink of an eye. So except for Dandan, Feng Lianying and Zhou Yan'an didn't discover what had been going on. Seeing the sword about to reach him once more, Zhou Yan'an closed his eyes in despair and he muttered 2 words, "Young master." However, the pain he expected didn't come and instead he suddenly felt something wrap around his waist. Zhou Yan'an's body flew into the air, brushing past the tip of Feng Lianying's sword in the nick of time. Almost at the same time, the entirety of Zijin Palace erupted in a burst of dazzling silver and purple lights, as if millions of shooting stars streaked across a night sky, making it difficult for people to open their eyes. Chapter 244. Disappearance of Zijin Palace. Feeling pain in her head due to the blinding light, Feng Lianying quickly covered her eyes, and through the gaps between her fingers, she could vaguely see the blinding white light converging in one direction. A gentle breeze blew past after the light had completely dissipated, and she was shocked to discover that she was no longer in Zijin Palace, but was now standing in a vast field. No, it should be said that Zijin Palace had completely disappeared, and standing opposite her was Zhou Yan'an, who was still in a panicked state. Tied around his waist was a white bone whip, while his clothes were tattered and soaked with blood. His breath was released in pants, as if his spiritual power would dry up at any moment. But Feng Lianying was already too busy to worry about Zhou Yan'an, her crazed, unwavering gaze falling on the teenager beside him. You're such a shameless person. Actually daring to receive the inheritance. Not only had he received the inheritance, his cultivation base had also advanced extremely fast. When he was still in the inheritance void, he was obviously only at Qi refining stage, but now he had reached Foundation Establishment stage. This must be because Zijin's master had passed down some sort of secret technique for him to enhance his cultivation base in such a short amount of time. If the one who received the inheritance had been her, then perhaps she would have been able to break through to the peak of Gold Core stage. It was because this stinky brat, this bastard, had caused her to lose her inheritance. As soon as Dandan saw that Hushi had awoken, he was no longer able to bear it and immediately pounced into her arms as he loudly cried, "Mother, you finally woke up." "What?" Dandan was scared he wouldn't see you again. Once Hushi hugged Dandan, she felt that something was wrong. The little pink pig's skin was previously soft and smooth, yet now it had become all wrinkled. Furthermore, the color of his skin was all dull and lifeless, while in the corner of his mouth there was a distinct trail of blood. "Dandan, are you injured?" "What, Mother? It was that evil woman who bullied us. She beat Long Long to death, and she even wanted to kill Mother and Uncle." "What?" Dandan wept with grief. Even though he was still immature, he had never in his life encountered anyone so repulsive and bloodthirsty. It was the first time he had known that people could be so awful, so cruel. Hushi shifted her gaze towards the little golden dragon beside her foot, and saw that he was indeed covered all over with cuts and bruises. And as she examined his dying form, she noticed that even both of his horns were broken, exposing bloody wounds. And laying at her side, with his spiritual power completely used up, was a man struggling to breathe. She instantly recognized him as shopkeeper Zhou of Shengda Hall. This person and these spirit pets, had they ended up in such a miserable state in order to protect her? A strange warm feeling surged in Hushi's heart. It was sour and painful, making her feel touched and distressed at the same time. But when her gaze moved towards Feng Lianying, the look on her face became cold and furious in a flash. This is the so-called Ice Lotus Fairy, whose skill in the inheritance void had been inferior. She had actually wanted to kill her in the real world, even injuring Dandan so severely. Thinking until here, the glint of a cold murderous aura flashed within Hushi's eyes. "Young Master Shiyu, hurry up and run away. We aren't strong enough to be her opponents," Zhou Yenin said weakly. "I've informed my young master of the situation, so as long as my young master comes he can save you. Don't mind me, quickly escape." A trace of surprise showed on Hushi's face. She hadn't expected that a stranger she would meet by chance would help her, but he had recklessly risked his life just for her. Only, no matter what the purpose of Zhou Yenin helping her was she, Hushi, the type of person who would abandon her benefactor and run away in order to protect her own safety? Chapter 245. Kowtow to apologize. When Zhou Yenin didn't see him moving, he became anxious. "Young Master my spiritual power is used up, and my meridians are damaged. It's certain that I won't be able to escape, so you should quickly go, otherwise it'll be too late." Hushi didn't pay attention to his words. Rather, she rapidly took out her silver needles, and in a flash sealed several of his major acupuncture points. As his acupuncture points were sealed, the spiritual energy and power that leaked from Zhou Yenin's damaged meridians slowly stopped, and his pale complexion began to return to normal. Not waiting for Zhou Yenin to say anything further, Hushi quickly fished out a few spiritual supplement pills and stuffed it into his mouth, before indifferently saying, "It's only a small injury. Why should you make out as if you were half dead? Rest assured, you and I won't die." Slowly he felt spiritual energy gathering in his dantian, and even his meridians, which had previously been burning, gradually started to cool down. Zhou Yenin was astonished, and as he looked at Hushi, his gaze steadily became more respectful. Yet when he saw Feng Lianying's dark expression as she walked towards them carrying her sword, he couldn't help but become anxious. "Young Master even if you were able to save this humble one's life, with just our strength alone, we're simply not able to be a match with Ice Lotus Fairy. I'll only drag you down." Zhou Yenin's words hadn't yet finished, when he suddenly felt his throat clog and he could no longer utter any sound. Hushi coldly withdrew her finger that had been pressing on his voice acupuncture point, and indifferently said, "You're too noisy, go to the side and obediently watch. Who said that we weren't a match with that damned woman, and could only die? Even if I really have to die, I must shed a layer of that vicious white lotus's skin. In this world, no one can injure Shiyu's people, without paying the price." Feng Lianying's eyes were still dark, as if they contained venom. Yet hearing this just as she was starting to calm down caused her to burst into a fit of loud laughter. Who do you think you are? You're merely foundation establishment stage trash. You think that since you received Zijin Palace's inheritance that you'll be able to go against me? In your dreams. Once that was said, Feng Lianying's expression became extremely dark and sinister. If you hand over the Golden Bodhi Tree and Zijin Palace now, this fairy will kindly leave your corpse intact. Otherwise, don't blame me for being merciless. My Luli sect has so many methods to torture people, and at that time, I'll let you have a taste of what it means to live in agony yet be unable to die. By then, even if you beg for forgiveness, it will certainly be too late. Hushi sneered, then took a confident step forward before indifferently saying, If you want me to hand over the Golden Bodhi Tree and Zijin Palace, I can. That's as long as you, Feng Lianing, kneel on the ground and kowtow towards me, shopkeeper Zhou, and my spirit pets to apologize. Furthermore, admit to the people in this world that you, Ice Lotus Fairy, are nothing but a reputation with no substance, a woman with a venomous heart. Then I'll give the inheritance to you, how is it? You bastard, you court death. Once she heard that, Feng Lianing flew into a rage. With a blazing flame springing up around her entire body, the long sword in her hand formed out countless sword lights, one that shot straight towards Hushi. Hushi immediately threw Dandan and the little golden dragon into her space, and seeing the sword lights flying towards her, she abruptly brandished the white bone whip in her hand. The white bone whip transformed into a whip with layer upon layer of shadow, and mixing with a murderous aura that was as cold as ice, it then enveloped the sword lights into a ball. With the movement of Hushi's feet blurring into shadow, she disappeared from where she was currently standing in the blink of an eye. Hushi's ice spiritual power was of course unable to resist a fire attack by a gold core stage martial artist. So the icy cold energy was rapidly engulfed by the flames, turning it into steam before it disappeared without a trace. But within this split-second gap, Hushi had also disappeared. This resulted in the long sword hurtling past and returning to Feng Lianying's hand without success once again. One sword light, also translated as a sword ray, a dazzling, powerful energy attack released from the edge of a blade. Forming sword light generally requires a profound cultivation base and a deep mastery of swordsmanship. Chapter 246, Dual Attributes of Water and Fire, Heavenly Spiritual Roots. Bastard. If you have the abilities, then don't hide. Do you think that just because you can hide, you can really avoid my attack? Feng Lianing gnashed her teeth, and with her figure blurring, a barrage of blazing darts flew everywhere. With the darts practically flying all around, no matter how fast Hushi moved, it was impossible for her to dodge this round of attack. Internally overjoyed, the corner of Feng Lianying's mouth curled into a sinister smile, as she imagined all the holes about to be poked into Hushi, turning her into a sieve. However, the next moment, her wide smile froze. She watched as those burning darts, after gaining a few meters, suddenly seemed like they encountered something. Unexpectedly it slowed down their speed, and somehow, it began to force the darts to face a different direction, before they wobbled in the air and fell to the ground. Next, the flame slowly extinguished. When she saw this, Feng Lianying's face was so gloomy that it looked like it was almost dripping water, appearing particularly cold. Hushi unhurriedly appeared before Feng Lianing once more, but this time, she was accompanied by countless clones that flashed into view one after another. Each one of the clones had a contemptuous sneer on their face, while a melodious and penetrating voice rang out carrying a cold murderous aura. Ice Lotus Fairy, your trick was only SSO. This was a technique that Hushi had used when she was still an assassin, illusionary step. Originally, if she would have used this technique on a martial artist with a high divine sense, it wouldn't have been effective at all. However, now that Hushi had advanced, her spiritual power and speed had greatly increased. In this world of martial artists, only the swiftness of a person's speed defined the winner. Therefore, now that she was using illusionary step, even Feng Lianing on Gold Core stage was unable to see where Hushi's real body was. Good, very good. I never would have thought that mere foundation establishment stage trash could have pushed me up to this point. The fury on Feng Lianying's face slowly vanished, transforming into a deep coldness. Loosening the grip of her right hand, her long sword worth several million spirit stones fell to the ground and produced a clang as it hit. It seems that you obtaining Zijin Palace's inheritance wasn't purely by luck. But since it's this way, it's even more reason for me to not allow you to keep on living. People like you would be a threat to me in the future, so it's better to eradicate you while you're still weak. Moreover, since you also attempted to seduce Brother Yu, if I'm unable to kill you today, I'll be in great trouble. The next moment, the shadow of a sword slowly formed in Feng Lianying's hand. But this sword was different from the previous fire attribute long sword. This sword's entire body seemed to emit the coldness of ice spiritual power. The sword flickered, and the spiritual herbs around the sword completely froze. And at a speed visible to the naked eye, the frost spread to cover the ground all around it. Zhou Yinan cried out in alarm. The ice crystal sword. A top-graded weapon, the ice crystal sword. Don't you have fire spiritual roots? Why are you able to use the ice crystal sword? Feng Lianying slightly raised her chin, an arrogant smile breaking across her face. Why do you think this fairy can be called the 1,000-year unparalleled genius martial artist of Luli sect? It's because I have the rare dual attributes of water and fire, two of the heavenly spiritual roots of the world. Zhou Yinan was dumbstruck. Dual attributes of the heavenly spiritual roots, where both attributes were completely unrelated. The dual attributes of water and fire, two of the heavenly spiritual roots, were represented when a martial artist practiced water and fire attribute cultivation methods. If practiced correctly, instead of each attribute canceling each other out, it could result in each one complementing the other. If you were a martial artist with just one attribute of the heavenly spiritual roots, you were already considered to be a rare genius in the world. Yet Feng Lianying was a gold core stage martial artist with dual attributes of the heavenly spiritual roots. How could young master she ever hope to defeat this woman? Chapter 247. Paying the price. If Zhou Yinan were to know that Hushi, who to his eyes had no chance of winning, possessed 5 attributes of the heavenly spiritual roots, his jaw would probably drop in shock. Feng Lianying's gaze was filled with contempt as she looked at Hushi. Don't think that just because you were a little smart and have a tad bit of skill that you can regard yourself as a genius. Compared to a real genius, you're still far from that and remain as trash. Ever since this fairy got this ice crystal sword, I've never let it touch blood, so today, the two of you can be the first. Consider it a privilege. Finished speaking, Feng Lianying brandished the ice crystal sword in her hand. Following that, crackling sounds were heard that could make anyone's teeth ache, and in the blink of an eye, it was as if even the air was frozen. Those shadows of Hushies dispersed into the air one by one, disappearing without a trace. Shortly afterwards, a figure who was running away was firmly frozen by a layer of ice, and was completely unable to move. It was Hushi. Feng Lianying burst into laughter, quickly stepping forward. I said before that I would certainly dismember your body, brat. Now you shall break apart with my capsule of ice. Feng Lianying raised the ice crystal sword, and fiercely threw it towards the frozen Hushi. However, before her sword could reach Hushi, the capsule of ice suddenly exploded with a bright red light. Feng Lianying was startled, but before she had time to react, she suddenly felt an acute pain in her abdomen. This caused her utter a miserable and mournful cry. At the same time she felt pain, her ice crystal sword had stabbed into Hushi's shoulder, the broken capsule of ice shattering into an icy powder that sprinkled the tops of their heads. Both of them had beautiful appearances, and under the fall of glittering ice dust, they seemed both stunning and breathtaking. But Feng Lianying's current expression was like she had met a ghost, terrified and filled with disbelief. The two of them were standing very close together. The dagger that had just been held in Hushi's hand was now nestled in Feng Lianying's abdomen, while Feng Lianying's ice crystal sword was deeply embedded into Hushi's left shoulder. Why? Obviously he had been frozen, but how was he able to thaw the ice capsule? Cold energy from the ice crystal sword slowly spread throughout Hushi's wound, but before it could completely freeze the left side of her body, The corner of her mouth curled up into a meaningful smile. Ice Lotus Fairy, it seems that I forgot to tell you. It isn't only you who possesses a gift of dual attributes of the heavenly spiritual roots. Furthermore, you seem to have forgotten what I said before. If you injure my people, you must pay the price. Even if I'll die, I will certainly make you pay a big price first. No. This is impossible. Feng Lianing screamed as she fell backwards. As the two separated, a squelch could be heard as the dagger and sword were pulled out of the pair, causing fresh blood to pour from their wounds. Feng Lianing covered the wound on her abdomen with her hands, her face filled with shock, resentment and defiance. No. I don't believe it. You're just trash, a useless person. How could you and I have the same innate skill? It was at this point that Feng Lianing finally realized that Hushi had deliberately been frozen by her. This was in order for her to draw closer to Hushi and loosen her guard while thinking that she was winning. Just before, Hushi had used her formidable water attribute cultivation method, so Feng Lianing had thought she was a martial artist with a single water attribute spiritual root. Hence, she had never thought that Hushi would be able to escape with only her left side being frozen, until Hushi broke free. Hushi reached out her hand to briefly press down on several of her acupuncture points, blocking the cold energy from spreading further. She then used her fire spiritual power to heat the cold energy corroding her meridians. Thus, her complexion became pale, and her body tottered on the verge of collapse due to the excessive use of spiritual power to halt the ice-cold energy invading her body. Chapter 248. Terrible poison. But Hushi didn't stop to rest, and instead waved the white bone whip in her hand. Her aura picturesque as she flew over and appeared before Feng Lianing. Feng Lianing, who was immersed in her shock and hatred, suddenly snapped out from her thoughts with a burst of killing intent within her eyes. Bastard, so you want to sneak attack me with your minuscule abilities? In your dreams. After speaking, about a dozen swords appears in her hand, and she immediately charged towards the white bone whip. As they collided, the white bone whip was chopped apart inch by inch under the sword swinging, falling to the ground like small worms. As Hushi's body was strongly pulled forward by Feng Lianing, she felt a palm harshly strike her chest. However, the moment the spiritual power reached Hushi's body she swayed, and like a kite that had its string snapped, she flew into the air before spitting out a mouthful of blood. Feng Lianing had missed Hushi's vital organs, but it was still enough oppression by immense spiritual power to make her qi and blood surge, as well as cause pain in her 5 internal organs. Feng Lianing sneered in loathing, detest, and contempt. At this moment, the wound on her stomach had started to recover, and she used her towering frame to look down at Hushi. No matter how hard you struggle, you're just like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. Do you really think that with just your tiny cultivation base, that you can successfully attack me? You think I sacrificed my white bone whip and risked being injured in order to attack you? The corner of Hushi's mouth curled into a sneer as she continued. Feng Lianing, could it be that until now you still haven't realized that there's something wrong with your wound? Feng Lianing became alarmed and lowered her head to see the wound on her abdomen in disbelief, noticing that it had already started to coagulate with dark spots appearing around the wound. Her previously arrogant voice was now trembling due to fear. What did you do to me? Hushi supported her still stiff left shoulder as she stood up, laughing coldly. I only smeared the drop of an interesting poison on you. This poison initially had no effect towards you gold core stage martial artists since the moment you become poisoned. You just need to take the antidote and you'll be fine. But Ice Lotus Fairy, apparently you let jealousy affect your mind. Now the poison has invaded your dantian and begun to spread throughout your meridians. How does it feel? This is impossible. How could your poison hurt me? Desperation and panic flashed on Feng Lianing's face. It must be known that martial artists of gold core stage were basically already immune to poison, unless it was highly poisonous like dense viper orchid which was manufactured by a high-level martial artist. Otherwise, a martial artist's body itself would naturally repel the impurities from the poison. But now her body had really shown signs of being poisoned. and the circulation of her spiritual power was also slowing down. That brat was nothing but foundation establishment stage trash. He seemed to be about 16 to 17 years old, so how was it possible that he could concoct such a terrible poison? The long sword appeared once more in Feng Lianying's hand as she aimed it at Hushi and screamed, "Bastard! If you don't want to die, then immediately hand over the antidote." Though Hushi's complexion was pale and her voice was weak, her face still wore an indifferent sneer. "It should be me saying those words. If you want me to hand over the antidote, I can. Now kneel down and apologize for me." "Very well. Did you think that with just an insignificant poison that this fairy would really be afraid?" Feng Lianying's expression twisted, and suddenly, a dark red medicinal pill appeared on her hand. As soon as that medicinal pill appeared, it emitted a delicate fragrance. Even if you were to merely smell this fragrance, it could give anyone a feeling of their spiritual power becoming incessantly agitated. Chapter 249. Mutual Destruction. Feng Lianying held the red medicinal pill in her hand with a conflicted expression on her face. This red pill was called a red phosphorus pill. It was one of Lu Lisek's secret protection methods, and a pill that was used to save a life in a crisis. Once you took a red phosphorus pill, no matter how serious a martial artist was injured, it would heal in a flash. Regardless of being infected by any poison, it would also completely clear up. Even the user's cultivation base would rise in a short time period, with their spiritual power increasing several-fold. However, this powerful red pill wasn't without side effects. After taking a red phosphorus pill, the martial artist's meridians would be damaged to a certain extent, and they would lose the possibility of advancing for at least 3 years. Therefore, unless they had reached a moment where they needed to use it as a last resort, the disciples of Lu Li sect absolutely wouldn't take it. Feng Lianying had always been ambitious and lofty. Desperately pursuing Nangongyu's steps, she had initially planned to advance to nascent soul stage within 10 years to be on an equal level with him. However, if she took this pill, her desire would become only a dream, because it would be impossible to improve her cultivation base in such a short time, let alone reaching nascent soul stage. But just the thought of Hushi, that bastard, as well as his and Nangongyu's intimate scene, Feng Lianying was burning with the fires of jealousy, completely losing all rationality. So much so that she didn't carefully notice that at this moment, the poison that had been congealing in her dantian was slowly weakening and dissipating. After all, when Hushi had made her poisons, she was only at foundation establishment stage. So for a foundation establishment stage's cultivation base, being able to manufacture a poison harmful to a gold core stage martial artist, that was as difficult as wanting to ascend to heaven. If only Feng Lianying had been paying attention, instead of being blinded by her jealousy and fear, she would have known that the poison simply couldn't injure her. At most, it could only add a few dark spots on her skin. Feng Lianying's expression twisted, and suddenly raising her hand, she swallowed the red phosphorus pill. In the blink of an eye, her spiritual power increased sharply from the energy throughout the secret territory, giving off an ominous feeling. The ice crystal sword abruptly appeared in her hand once more, and Feng Lianying's body slowly rose into the air to hover in place. She then looked down in contempt and disgust at Hushi and Zhou Yan'an below her, like she would stare at tiny ants. "Shiyu, you made this fairy lose the inheritance, and made me pay such a big price by taking the red phosphorus pill. I swear that today I'll cut off your limbs and destroy your dantian, making it so that you'll spend the rest of your life as neither a person nor a ghost in a boundless hell. This is the price you have to pay for committing an offense against me, Ice Lotus Fairy." After her words, Feng Lianying's body shook, and the ice crystal sword fused together with her body as she charged straight towards Hushi like a tornado. Zhou Yan'an exclaimed out loud, his face filled with despair. Hushi pursed her lips as she stood her ground, a formidable spiritual power vortex slowly condensing in her hand. This spiritual power wasn't only her made of her own power, but part of her space's unimaginably vast spiritual power. Once this spiritual power vortex exploded, not only would Hushi and Feng Lianying die, this entire area of the secret territory would be affected. However, Hushi's expression only showed a cold determination. There was neither remorse or indecision, rather, there was a determination capable of destroying heaven and exterminating earth. A conviction to die in mutual destruction. She had said once before that even if she should die, she would certainly make Feng Lianying pay a painful price. That price was death. But just as the condensation of her spiritual power vortex started spinning faster and faster, and the ice crystal sword in Feng Lianying's hand drew closer to her, a sudden scarlet light shone before Hushi's eyes, blinding her. But before she had time to react, it enveloped herself and Zhou Yenin. Chapter 250. Gu Lufeng. A loud bang echoed around the area, and the ice crystal sword very quickly turned into steam and evaporated into the air as it hit the barrier of red light. Additionally, the barrier of red light slowly dissipated from the impact of the ice crystal sword, similar to when ice and fire collided and melted. The next moment, Feng Lianying's body was thrown backwards far into the distance, and as she coldly and gloomy glared at the barrier of red light, it disappeared without a trace. Before Hushi had time to react, Zhou Yenin became startled and shouted in delight, "Young master, you finally came." Along with Zhou Yenin's words, a figure in bright red clothes appeared in front of Hushi. From Hushi's angle, she could only see that this person was slender and wearing a white mask on his face. Painted on the white mask was a queer ghost pattern, making the person look somewhat sinister. His pair of peach blossom eyes that weren't covered by the mask were gleaming like the reflection of waves under sunlight. A beauty that gave people a one-of-a-kind feeling of attraction. Once Feng Lianying noticed the white mask on the person's face, she couldn't help but cry out in alarm, "Gu Lufeng." Although Hushi had never heard the name of Gu Lufeng before, she was very aware of Shengde Hall in Yanjing City. While its appearance was that of a small medical store, in actuality, it was a powerful intelligence organization. And the organization behind it mustn't be underestimated. And it could be assumed that the man addressed as young master by Zhou Yenin was the owner of Shengde Hall. Gu Lufeng unhurriedly opened his mouth and said, "Ice Lotus Fairy, long time no see. I trust you've been well since we last met?" Having heard what he said, the look on Feng Lianying's face twisted with fierceness. She didn't understand. All she wanted to do was kill a foundation establishment stage brat. It should have been very easy, but why did someone constantly appear to hinder her? Is that brat really so lucky? Feng Lianying grit her teeth as she answered, "Gu Lufeng, can it be that you want to meddle in my business too? Granted that if you want to meddle, you have to consider whether or not your strength is a match with Lu Li's sect." Since Gu Lufeng was wearing a mask, his expression couldn't be clearly seen. But even so, his voice gave a sense of laziness and indifference. "Fairy is so serious. The thing I dislike the most is meddling in other people's business. Similarly, my, Gu Liufeng's people, also absolutely don't turn to other people to teach someone a lesson. I wonder how shopkeeper Zhou offended Fairy, to the extent that Fairy was using heavy hands on him." Feng Lianying's gaze shot back and forth between Zhou Yenin and Gu Lufeng, a glint of coldness flashing within her eyes as she said, "The one to start a feud with this fairy wasn't really shopkeeper Zhou, but rather that foundation establishment stage stinky brat. So if you grab your man and leave now, making him vow to never reveal what happened today, I'll let you off. How is it?" After Feng Lianying finished speaking, the look on Zhou Yenin's face became apprehensive. He anxiously looked at Hushi and couldn't help but move his gaze to Gu Lufeng, taking quite a while before he mustered enough courage to say, "Young master, I owe young master Shi a debt for saving my life. I can't abandon him, no matter what." However, Gu Lufeng seemed as if he hadn't heard him. He just slightly narrowed his eyes as he stared at the arrogant Feng Lianying in front of him and faintly sighed. "It seems as if Ice Lotus Fairy has misunderstood my intentions. Who said I asked you to let shopkeeper Zhou off?" Hearing this, a smug smile graced Feng Lianying's face. Since young master Gu understands the advantages and disadvantages, then that's for the best. Zhou Yenin has dishonored this fairy, so he should be given a lesson. I can promise that this fairy will be able to keep his little life. Chapter 251. Hiding one's ability by keeping quiet? The corners of Gu Liufeng's eyes twitched as he continued. What I mean is, Ice Lotus Fairy, is that since you injured one of my people, let me return the favor to Fairy in the same way you injured him. That way, the grudge between us can be considered as settled. You, Gu Lufeng, you're clearly unable to differentiate between good and bad. Feng Lianying's entire body was shaking from anger. If you were tactful you would scram, and if you don't blame me for being impolite. Your cultivation base is rather equal with mine. But since I now have the assistance of a medicinal pill, my power far surpasses yours. Do you really think I'm afraid of you? Gu Lufeng laughed lazily, his eyes gleaming brightly. Or Ice Lotus Fairy could choose to make amends by apologizing to my subordinate. You're looking for death. Feng Lianing furiously screamed, her whole body like a shadow sword as it shot over towards Gu Lufeng. Currently, what she hated the most was hearing others ordering her to kneel down and apologize. That bastard, had humiliated her. In this lifetime she would never forget this. In the blink of an eye 2 figures, one red and one white, were locked together in battle. The two people's movements were extremely fast as they flew about in the air of the secret territory. They were constantly using formidable spiritual pressure wantonly, causing bright lights to bloom in the sky. Zhou Yan'an watched on in a daze for a while. He felt a tightness in his chest, and although he was also a gold core stage martial artist, his current level wasn't enough for him to be a match in such a battle. Hushi watched on with an extremely serious expression, strangely able to follow the movements of the two people in the air. To her surprise, at this time the two seemed to be evenly matched in their fight, but she felt that Gu Liufeng's strength seemed to be far more than what he was exhibiting. Was he hiding it? Hushi frowned and seemed to be in trance. Yet suddenly her eyes came into contact with a pair of eyes that seemed to be smiling yet not smiling. This pair of eyes resembled peach blossom petals. It was like they gleamed with the reflection of bright multicolored sunlight, but in a flash, these lights disappeared without a trace. Gu Lufeng. In such an intense moment of fighting, he was actually still able to be distracted enough to look at her. Moreover, those eyes contained a smiling expression that was deep and yet tranquil, as if they could see through her mind. Hushi suddenly lowered her head, a touch of contemplation sweeping across her eyes. Zhou Yan'an noticed Hushi bowing his head, with the side of his face delicate and pale. His whole aura was that of a frail yet beautiful porcelain doll that could shatter at any time. He couldn't help but comforted him with, "Young Master Shi, you don't have to worry, as long as my young master is here nothing will happen to us. Although he's only at gold core stage, he's entirely different compared to such a useless person like me. I've also never seen a martial artist on the same level beat him." Hushi raised an eyebrow without answering, instead suddenly asking him, "Shopkeeper Zhou, we only met by chance and I have no affection towards you, so why did you want to risk your life to save me?" From the beginning Hushi couldn't figure out this point. She could understand why Dandan and the little golden dragon would save her, but Zhou Yan'an and her were only strangers by chance. Helping her might be normal, but risking his life to save her was really too strange. Zhou Yan'an's face showed a trace of shame and indecision as he stayed silent for a long while, before replying, "To be honest, this humble one initially came to Zijin Palace to get the inheritance, but it wasn't for the Mahao inheritance. Rather, it was to get a pill prescription from Zijin's master." Hushi's face showed her surprise. She had already received Zijin Palace's inheritance. Hence she naturally knew that there wasn't any pill prescriptions included in the inheritance of Zijin's master. At most he only left her an extraordinary pill furnace in Zijin Palace. Chapter 252 Sheer, why are you here? Zhou Yan'an continued and said, but after seeing young Master Shi, this humble one suddenly felt that compared to a fabled pill prescription of Zijin's master, maybe young Master Shi is our real savior. Savior? What does he mean? Zhou Yan'an's body was weak and his complexion pale, but at this moment he got up from the ground and deeply bowed towards Hushi. Young Master Shi, to be quite honest, this humble one risked his life to save you because there's something I must request of you. Tell me. If this humble one didn't guess wrong, Young master, she is the genius doctor who healed Ouyang's heir. Zhou Yan'an was a little nervous as he looked at Hushi, and it wasn't until she nodded in admission that he heaved a sigh of relief. He then continued and said, "After we leave the secret territory, this humble one wants to ask young master Shi for help with saving a person." Zhou Yan'an's words were extremely straightforward, and Hushi released a long sigh. She was most afraid of being slyly schemed against and used as a chess piece. Shopkeeper Zhou's facade was plausible in how he dealt with business, but it was her most liked way of doing things. In any case, it was best to be clear about any business transaction over owing an unfathomable favor. Thinking up till here, Hushi slightly raised her head and lightly said, "Okay, I agree to your request. It can be regarded as returning your favor of today." The 17-year-old youngster didn't have the slightest trace of hesitation on his face when speaking, and eyes were shining astonishingly bright. If such words were said to others, it would make people feel that he was arrogant. But in the case of this youngster saying it before Zhou Yan'an, he felt that it was only right, and hence he was incomparably happy and relieved. When the two of them were chatting, Hushi's expression suddenly changed slightly. She sensed many people coming in their direction, each of their auras very powerful and frightening. Furthermore, she didn't know whether it was a group of friends or foes. Just when she was about to warn Zhou Yan'an and Gu Lufeng who was in the air, Feng Lianing abruptly uttered a pained screech, and like a kite being snapped from its string, she fluttered as she fell backwards towards the ground. Gu Liufeng's eyes filled with obvious astonishment, and then narrowing his eyes slightly, he revealed an interested smile. The next moment, a murderous aura as sharp as a sword charged straight towards Gu Lufeng. Gu Liufeng's expression turned slightly serious, replacing the previously indifferent expression he had when battling with Feng Lianing. With a wave of his hand, a blazing red sword appeared gripped in his right hand. Two swords then collided in high altitude, making an explosion of tremendous energy that caused spiritual energy to fluctuate throughout all of the secret territory. After the explosion, Gu Lufeng stumbled backwards a step and slowly fell to the ground. Because his qi and blood were boiling, blood as bright red as a cherry started flowing down his thin lips that were exposed under the mask. "Young master, you're injured?" Zhou Yan'an exclaimed, then struggled to get up to treat Gu Lufeng. Gu Lufeng smiled slightly, his deep gaze looking towards the people slowly appearing from not far away. His voice clear as he said, "His Highness Hell King's cultivation base is profound. You really do have a well-deserved reputation." Among the group of newcomers, many of them were gold core stage and above martial artists. In the front, a man dressed in a purple robe had anxiety plastered across his face as he held the deathly pale Feng Lianing in his arms, desperately shouting, "Little sister Lianing, are you okay?" Behind the purple-robed man, walking with an indifferent manner and a gloomy expression upon his face, was Nan Gongyu with eyes as cold as ice. Nan Gongyu's icy cold gaze swept over Gu Lufeng, and as they landed behind him his eyes suddenly widened. "Sheer, how come you're here?" Nan Gongyu's voice abruptly became high, causing everyone present to almost jump in shock. Chapter 253. Why can't I be here? His Highness Hell King's strength and identity were thought of as unattainable. His attitude to the outside world was always indifferent, cold and unyielding. Even when everyone was rushing like ducks towards this dangerous sealed dragon domain, his attitude was like a skillful butcher with a cleaver. He didn't attach the slightest importance to any of the treasures. But at this very moment anyone who was observant could see how agitated Hell King was. How much anger and worry was contained in his voice. Qing Long, who was behind Nan Gongyu, held back the impulse to support his forehead. Why does his master become a completely different person every time he saw Miss Naylin? Hushi of course saw Nan Gongyu. She had noticed earlier than Gu Lufeng and Feng Lianing that there were people approaching, but before she had the time to think any further, Feng Lianing seemed to have been seriously injured and fell, uttering a delicate yet miserable shriek. At first Hushi felt that this was strange. The whole time Gu Lufeng hadn't been trying his hardest, while Feng Lianing had become quite powerful after taking a red phosphorus pill. So how could she have somehow been hit? It wasn't until she saw the purple-robed man holding Feng Lianying in his arms with a face full of rage, and Nan Gongyu following behind that she understood. Her heart filled with an icy sneer. So it was a staged trick. No wonder she would rather bear Gu Liufeng's blow. It was all for the sake of staging this scene. Didn't she see how angry and how distressed her brother Yu was now? Thinking up to here, a corner of Hushi's mouth curled into a cold smile. Your Highness Hell King and Ice Lotus Fairy could come here, so why can't I come? Or do you think this secret territory was opened by your Hell King manner? Nan Gongyu was dumbfounded. How long had it been since he'd heard Shi'er using such a cold tone when speaking to him? However, when Nan Gongyu's gaze fell to the wound that hadn't yet healed on her left shoulder and her small pale face, his heart tightened with intense anger and distress. How can this girl be so reckless? What kind of place is this sealed dragon domain? Even gold core stage martial artists were cautious when they would come. And yet she, such a delicate woman, actually dared to enter the inner layer of the secret territory. If something had happened, if Nan Gongyu didn't dare to think any further, the fear and worry in his heart changing into an overflowing fury. It caused him to walk over in large strides to the little girl who watched him with a stubborn attitude. However, he barely took a step when the corner of his robes were pulled by someone, while in his ears came Feng Lianying's weak voice. Brother Yu, I'm cold so painful. Upon saying that, she abruptly began to vomit blood. Her beautiful face had become a deathly pale. It looked like she could die at any moment. The purple-robed man holding her felt distressed. Due to his worry, perspiration was rapidly dripping down his face, and seeing Feng Lianying clinging to Nan Gongyu, he couldn't help but urgently say, Nan Gong, what are you doing just standing there? Quickly come and check on little sister Lianying's condition. Nan Gongyu didn't look back or turn to go see Feng Lianying, rather, he stared at Hushi with a burning gaze. The purple-robed man urgently said once more, Nan Gong, don't forget what you owe towards the Luli sect. If little sister Lianying dies, your lifetime debt won't ever be cleared. You still won't think of a way to save little sister Lianying? Do you want to see her die? Nan Gongyu's figure became slightly sluggish, before in the end he stopped and turned around to check on Feng Lianying's condition. Hushi coldly watched this play of Nan Gongyu turning around, squatting down, and enveloping Feng Lianying in his spiritual power. When she saw Feng Lianying's bashful and hopeful expression as she stared at Nan Gongyu with fixed eyes, her heart surged with a violent anger. Chapter 254. Troubling young master Hushi wasn't angry with Feng Lianying's shamelessness, nor was she angry with Nan Gongyu's heartlessness. Rather, she was angry towards herself for actually being tripped over by a stone twice. She clearly knew that love and promises couldn't be trusted. Yet why did she still care about it like a dimwit? And she clearly knew that she shouldn't be tempted, that she couldn't believe them. Yet why did she still allow other people to occupy her heart little by little? Hushi, Hushi, in the end, what were you expecting? Were you expecting that Nan Gongyu would abandon his childhood sweetheart and come to you? Or that you would be enough to turn him against his childhood sweetheart? Haha, dream on. But since she had now woken up to reality, if she were to withdraw now it wouldn't be too late. Would it? Hushi's hands tightly clenched into fists, not at all sensing her fingernails embedding themselves into her palms. Suddenly, a man's deep and magnetic voice entered her ears. Tsk, this could be disastrous. His Highness Hell King and his bodyguard Qing Long, as well as Luli Sec's senior disciple Nia Jinshin. All of these few people possess at least the high-level strength of a gold core stage martial artist. His Highness Hell King is the strongest, so strong that no one can find out the depth of his strength. Now it seems that our situation is bad, really bad. Hushi came back to her senses and glanced at the man wearing bright red beside her. When she saw him say the words really bad, she noticed that his expression was relaxed and without a trace of worry. But when he withstood Nan Gongyu's sword attack, he had obviously sustained a heavy surge of spiritual energy. Now the bright red blood on his thin lips had faded into a pale color. Hushi suddenly reached her hand out and gripped his wrist, then started pouring her spiritual power into his meridians. Gu Lufeng was startled. By reflex he wanted to struggle and free his hand, But when he realized the way in which she was examining his condition, he couldn't help but show an interested expression. "You're the little genius doctor that Yenin mentioned?" But before Hushi could answer, Zhou Yenin had already replied. "Young master, it is him, genius Dr. Shiyu. His medical skill has reached perfection. Even Ouyang's heir was able to have his broken meridians healed after more than a year of disability, believe me." Zhou Yenin hadn't yet finished speaking when Gu Lufeng took back his hand, preventing Hushi from continuing to examine him. Hushi didn't force him, instead indifferently saying, "If you want to completely dissolve the energy from the sword concealed within your body, I need to give an acupuncture treatment to your 3 acupuncture points: lung meridian, shoulder meridian, and back meridian." Gu Lufeng stared blankly, then fixedly looked at her for a moment before suddenly laughing. "Then I'll have to trouble young master Shi." After saying this, he didn't mind in the slightest and took off his clothes, exposing the packed muscles and smooth veins on his naked upper body. Hushi stood behind him and nimbly started to insert the silver needles in her hand into his acupuncture points. Then her figure flashed, and she came in front of Gu Lufeng, inserting the last silver needle into his lung meridian acupuncture point to slowly help the excess energy drain out. Hence Hushi's movements became very slow, while the thin and transparent silver needles held in her fingers lightly twirled. This was accompanied with the pure essence of spiritual power permeating into the air little by little. At this moment, Gu Lufeng sat cross-legged on the grass with Hushi slightly bending her body over him to rotate the silver needles with a focused and dignified expression. The natural light in the secret territory fell on the youth's fair face, and shined upon his straight exquisite nose, pink and tender cherry lips, as well as long eyelashes that were as thick as a fan. The youth's head leaned forward slightly, his long shapely eyebrows lightly creasing. From Gu Liufeng's point of view he could see the youth's pointed chin, fair and slender neck, and the fine radiance slowly extending to his delicate collarbone, which then slanted to his slightly open robe. Chapter 255. Pull out your tongue. The youth's slender and fair hand was just like piece of carved jade as it gently hovered over his bare skin, while every so often the youth's cool touch would bring with it a throbbing feeling that made him shudder. Gu Lufeng felt a sudden skip in his chest, and bowing his head, the steady energy within his body suddenly surged and brought a bright red color to lips once again. His expression was calm, but in his mind a line continuously echoed. This little genius doctor called Qi was rather too good-looking. As soon as Nan Gongyu crouched to examine Feng Lianying's condition, he immediately knew that she only had minor injuries. It simply wasn't as serious as the expression on her face suggested. With his face turning gloomy, he then got up and went to find Hushi. Yet just as he did, his robe was once again pulled on by Feng Lianing. "Brother you, just then I had to take a red phosphorus pill to be able to compete against Gu Lufeng. Later on, I won't be able to advance, right? Brother you, will you dislike me then?" Even with this remark, Nan Gongyu still didn't respond. However, Nie Jingchen's, the purple-robed man's, complexion changed, and with distress and anger flashing across his face he said, "Little sister Lianing, didn't master say that unless it was a last resort, you shouldn't take a red phosphorus pill? Your innate skill is rare. Taking a red phosphorus pill will encumber you for several years." Feng Lianing showed a sad and grievous expression, while her beautiful eyes gazed at Nan Gongyu as she choked on sobs. "I was all alone, while the other side had 3 people. If I didn't use a red phosphorus pill, I don't know if I could have waited until the arrival of you all and brother you. If I didn't have the assistance of a red phosphorus pill to allow me to hold on until this moment, I don't know how they would have humiliated me. They're going too far." Nie Jinchen roared with a gravelly voice. "Since they dared to hurt you to such a point, I'll make those 3 wretches pay you back 1,000 times over. Little sister Lianing, just wait, I'll go take revenge for you now." However, Nie Jinchen hadn't yet finished speaking, when Nan Gongyu's face darkened, and he coldly said, "Shut your mouth." Nie Jinchen was startled, and didn't react for a while. His face expressed a somewhat confused look. Nan Gongyu's cold gaze swept over him, and he unhurriedly stressed his words. "If you say wretches again, I'll pull your tongue out." The weather in the secret territory was warm, But Nie Jinshin felt so cold he was shivering. Nan Gongyu's gaze at this moment was too frightening. It was as if Nie Jinshin continued speaking, the other party would immediately tear him to shreds. However, Feng Lianying's pretty face twisted, intense jealousy and hatred glinting in her eyes. From his clothes, Nan Gongyu withdrew a bottle of medicinal pills and threw it to Nie Jinshin. Give this pill to Lianing and use your spiritual power to unblock her meridians. After an hour she will be healed. Joy flashed within Nie Jinshin's eyes. If he had to use his spiritual power to unblock her meridians, then that meant that he and little sister Lian would have to be in close contact. Nie Jinshin was the senior disciple of the head of the Luli sect. At such a young age he had already reached the peak of gold core stage, so it could be said that he had boundless prospects. Throughout Miluo continent there were many women who admired him, completely willing to be his concubine. But in Nie Jinshin's heart, he had always been attracted to his junior, Feng Lianing, no other woman. With regard to Feng Lianying's words, he took them as absolute truth and would never disobey her. Now that Nan Gongyu had given him an opportunity to get close to his goddess, how could he not be happy? Nie Jinshin poured a medicinal pill out of the bottle for Feng Lianing to swallow, but was fiercely pushed away. Watching as Nan Gongyu got up without hesitation and abandoned her, her heart was filled with extreme hatred. Chapter 256. What are you doing? Before having known Shiyu, that scoundrel, brother Yu had never treated her like this. He had never regarded her as nothing. If that bastard could disappear sooner, then that would be great. With this thought, Feng Lian increased her brows and uttered a pained moan. Grabbing onto Nie Jinshin's sleeve, she said with a grief-filled voice, Senior brother, all my life up until now, I've never suffered such a humiliation. Especially from that brat called Shiyu. He's a man and yet he actually wanted to seduce brother Yu. He even wanted me to kneel and apologize to him. When I didn't agree, they tried to kill me. Who gave them dog guts? When Nie Jinshin heard this, he felt fury boiling in his heart, a murderous intent that burned him up. However, before he could finish speaking, he felt a severe fluctuation of spiritual power, mixing with a tremendous amount of fury rage through the secret territory. In their ears came Nan Gongyu's demon-like voice. What are you doing? Although Nan Gongyu had seemingly been occupied by Feng Lianying's dying drama, in his heart, he had only been thinking of Hushi. After he had confirmed that Feng Lianying was merely exaggerating a minor injury just to get his sympathy, he immediately became fed up. But just as he turned around, he saw a scene that made him burn with jealousy. The scene was of the naked upper body of a young man wearing a mask, which revealed a smooth torso, while a beautiful youngster bowed his head and stared attentively at the man's body. The distance between the two was close, so close that their breaths were mingling. It was almost as if in the next moment they would intimately embrace each other. Nan Gongyu felt a fiery flame soar in his heart, burning it. This flame seemed to carry with it thistles and thorns, mutilating his heart. On one hand he was angry, while on the other hand he felt the heartache and hatred of being betrayed and abandoned, making him want to tear up everything in sight. The moment Nan Gongyu had shouted, it just so happened that Hushi had been cleaning the energy within Gu Liufeng's body, slowly pulling out the silver needle that was inserted in his lung meridian acupuncture point. But abruptly she felt an immense amount of spiritual pressure in the atmosphere capable of crushing people. After all, her cultivation base was only at meridian stage. This, coupled with the injury she had received before, using up her spiritual power, and now a formidable spiritual pressure attack, all caused her complexion to pale in an instant. The next moment a blazing shadow enveloped her, this tall figure blocking her without hesitation. She heard Gu Liufeng's concerned voice reach her ears. My clothes are made from special ice silk. It can withstand most spiritual pressure and divine sense attacks. If you drape it over your shoulders you'll feel much better. Hushi was startled as the crimson robes were wrapped around her. A slight trace of warmth and fragrance wafted from the clothes, making the uncomfortable feeling of a moment ago disappear in a flash. While Gu Lufeng was now only wearing white inner clothing, His aura seemed leisurely and graceful as he nonetheless firmly protected her behind him. Gu Lufeng faced Nan Gongyu, the sound of laughter clear in his voice. Your Highness Hell King, I've always respected you as a hero of Jinling Kingdom. But now you're unable to distinguish the truth from lies and have listened to woman's slander. I'm afraid that isn't very wise, right? How could Nan Gongyu pay attention to what he had said, when his heart and eyes were only filled with the sight of this man, and Hushi standing very close together? Furthermore, this man had even dared to drape his clothes over Hushi's body. His complexion was so glacial it seemed like water could be squeezed out of it, while his voice was like a demon's from hell. Immediately get away from her. Otherwise, don't blame me for being ruthless. Chapter 257. Oscar winner Gu Lufeng was startled. He felt that Hell King's attitude was very strange. But before he could speak, Hushi pulled on his sleeve and stood in front of him. She then coldly said, "Move aside, this has nothing to do with you. The person they want to deal with is me, so you should take shopkeeper Zhou with you and leave now." Gu Lufeng ignored her, and heedlessly walked up to stand by her side. You don't know this, but from the moment Feng Lianing and I fought, our fates became intertwined. That shameful woman is so petty. Do you really think that she'll let us off? Hushi's brows wrinkled, and glancing at the faint spiritual power fluctuations of Zhou Yan'an next to them, her voice became gloomy. Sorry, it's because of me that the two of you have become involved. As Gu Lufeng tilted his head to look at the side of Hushi's beautiful, snow-white face, he could feel his heart softening. It was as if there was a warmth slowly building in his chest. But before he could say something again, his expression suddenly changed. His hand that had initially moved to console Hushi was abruptly pulled back, and he staggered backward several steps. A sharp, sword-like energy fiercely struck his body and he fell to the ground. This made grass bits fly everywhere, some fluttering to land on Hushi's hair and clothes. Gu Lufeng lifted his gaze, only to meet with Nan Gongyu's dark and fearful glare. It was in these eyes that he saw a murderous rage, one that seemed as if Nan Gongyu wanted to dismember him, crushing his bones and scattering their dust. The next moment Nan Gongyu changed his line of sight, looking from him to the point next to him. Glaring at the pale complexion of Hushi, he slowly extended his hand. "Sheer, come here." Hushi coldly looked at him, the look on her face like condensed frost. "Go over there, what for?" "To allow you, Your Highness Hell King, to kill me and take revenge for your beloved little sister Lianing?" The look on Nan Gongyu's face was beyond ugly, and he suddenly walked forwards a step before darkly saying, "Sheer in your heart." His words hadn't yet finished, when Feng Lianing, who had previously been lying on the grounds acting like she was on her last breath, stood up. With Nie Jinshan's support, she went to Nan Gongyu's side and grabbed his sleeve. "Brother, you don't be like this. Young master, she didn't purposely injure me, you mustn't blame him." Hushi looked at the intimacy of the two people, and the coldness in her eyes became colder, little by little, like a 1,000-years-old glacier. Such a pure and kind-hearted white lotus. Look at that emotion in her eyes, that expression and that tone. If this act had been seen in her past life, then Feng Lianing would definitely have been suitable to win an Oscar. In front of people she appeared pure, cold, and noble, but behind their backs she was malicious and fierce. And now, she had managed to change once more by becoming delicate and pitiful. A man would unconditionally believe her and want to cherish her, wishing to hold her in their arms. Nan Gongyu was also a man. With such a beauty throwing herself into his arms, how could his heart not be moved? As she sneered at her own thoughts, Gu Lufeng suddenly leaned towards her and whispered in her ear, "Little Yue, do you know if there's a problem with that fairy's eyes? Obviously it was me who injured her. Yet why is she implying that it was you who injured her? You're only foundation establishment stage, while she's gold core stage. By saying that it was you who injured her, isn't she afraid of losing face? Little Yue? Where did that stupid nickname come from?" Hushi aimed a glare at him, then looked back at Feng Lianing and sneered. "You say that as if she wasn't injured by me, and that she hadn't hurt anyone before me. So what if she was a gold core stage martial artist? She dared to provoke my people. Even if she herself wasn't a match with Feng Lianing, the least she could do was make her pay a price of being skinned alive. At this moment, Feng Lianing was wearing a white dress stained with specks of crimson blood, while her complexion was deathly pale. As the wind blew, it caused her white dress to flutter, making her appear like a willow, all delicate and charming. Chapter 258. Don't touch her with your dirty hands. Upon hearing Hushi's remark, rage flashed in her eyes first, before glistening teardrops welled in them. Pulling on Nangongyu's sleeve, it seemed as if she had suffered an enormous grievance as she bit her lip and said, "Young Master Shi and young Master Gu's relationship is really good. I'd heard that Gu Liufeng's conduct was usually arrogant and unsociable. Yet today you unexpectedly agreed with young Master Shi to regard me an enemy. The friendship between the two of you is really enviable. However, since I'm considering giving young Master Shi face, I won't bother dealing with Gu Lufeng. You'd better go. Quickly leave before brother Yu gets angry. Rest assured, I will try my best to appease brother Yu." Though she'd said it in a lovely and pitifully manner, provocativeness and bragging was visible in Feng Lianying's eyes. As she looked at Hushi, a coldness appeared in her eyes that quickly disappeared. And when she turned to look back at Nangongyu, she acted gentle and kind-hearted. Nie Jinchen was still supporting her on the side, and his face had long become flushed due to anger. Having heard everything she was saying, he could feel his rage growing. "Nangong, don't listen to little sister Lianing. She was too kind-hearted, and that made some people who were unable to tell good from bad dare to have such ideas against her. Such vicious people like these, they shouldn't be spared. Let them know how people end up when they commit an offense towards people they shouldn't offend." Gu Lufeng clicked his tongue in praise, and putting a hand on Hushi's shoulder he sighed. "I've seen shameless people, but I've never before seen one so shameless. I never would have thought that the famous Hell King would actually fancy such a disgusting woman. Really, seeing it for yourself is 100 times better than hearing it from someone else. Little Yuer, I think it's better that we don't get involved with this bunch of insane people. They're so shameless that it's unbearable to watch. Since we aren't their match in strength, we might as well take this opportunity to run." Having said that, Gu Lufeng leaned close to Hushi's ear to seemingly tease her, and whispered, "In a moment I'll count to 3. You take Yinan behind me and hide. We only have one chance to escape." Hushi nodded, but when she raised her head she met with Nangongyu's burning gaze, causing her chest to feel like it was being crushed by a heavy stone. Suddenly, Nangongyu walked towards her with large steps, and because Feng Lianing was still latching onto his sleeve, she ended up stumbling due to his abrupt movement. She watched Nangongyu's back in disbelief as he left with quick strides, and she immediately shouted loudly, "Brother Yu!" However, Nangongyu's pace didn't pause in the slightest. It even seemed as though he didn't hear her. Seeing Nangongyu walk towards them, Gu Liufeng's face became grave. So leaning closer to Hushi's ear once more, he went to whisper to her. All of a sudden, lightning appeared out of the blue to fiercely strike Gu Liufeng's arm. Staggering a step backwards, he uttered a muffled groan. The arm that had been struck by lightning now a bloody sight to behold. Nangongyu glared at him with a ruthless and bloodthirsty gaze, his voice dark and cold as he spat out from between his teeth and lips. "I said don't touch her with your dirty hands." Gu Lufeng was startled, but before he could react Hushi had already grabbed his injured arm, quickly spilling a silvery white medicinal powder onto the wound. In the blink of an eye, that bloody wound rapidly stopped bleeding and healed. Following that, in such a short moment, it had already become a scab. Hushi heaved a sigh of relief, and asked him in a somewhat concerned voice, "Are you okay?" Just as those words left her mouth, she felt something tightly wrap around her waist. But before she could realize what was happening, her body soared into the air to land in a warm embrace. When she raised her head, her eyes met with Nangongyu's bloodshot eyes. Chapter 259. How could I kill you? The eyes glaring at her were frighteningly bloodthirsty, and paired with such a murderous aura being exuded from his body, it could make anyone tremble from fear. It was as though in the next moment that she would be torn into shreds and devoured. Hushi's heart sank little by little, while the corners of her mouth curled into a forlorn yet mocking smile. This man, does he hate her now? Does he hate her because she injured his beloved woman? Those previous sentimental feelings, those previous promises, in front of his beloved Ice Lotus Fairy, does he regard them as? Nangongyu raised her chin, then slowly said, Sheer, I just told you to come to me, didn't you hear me? His voice was exceptionally gentle, but when it reached her ears, it caused her to shudder. She wanted to step away from him, but her entire body was enveloped by a tremendous amount of spiritual power pressure, leaving her unable to move even a single step. This was her first time directly experiencing Nangongyu's formidable strength, helping her to understand how it made despair grow in a person's heart. Feng Lianing suddenly raised her voice and shouted from where she was standing not too far away from them. Brother Yu, I know you're angry on my behalf, but young master, she is your friend after all. Please consider my reputation and don't make things too difficult for them, okay? Young master, she didn't intentionally injure me. I believe he certainly knows his mistake. After saying this, she then turned to shout at Hushi. Young master, she, quickly admit your mistake to Brother Yu. Otherwise, when Brother Yu's anger explodes, even I won't be able to stop him. Do you want to just helplessly watch on as your young master Gu dies in Brother Yu's hands? Hushi sneered upon hearing that. An lustrous purple shade gleamed within her jet-black phoenix eyes. She then firmly stared at Nangongyu as she said, Is this your purpose for calling me over? It was to kill me to take revenge on behalf of your close female friend? Nangongyu, am I that foolish in your eyes? So foolish that I'll obediently send myself to you and let you kill me? Nangongyu's entire body shook, and his arm that was wrapped around her waist tightened as he said in a trembling voice, Sheer, what nonsense you are talking about? How could I kill you? Just hearing her say that and thinking that this girl might die in the secret territory, he was so scared his blood turned cold. Sheer would actually go so far as to say he would kill her. Young master, I said earlier that I won't let Brother Yu kill you. So why do you have to misunderstand me? Came Feng Lianying's tear-filled voice. Wasn't it enough that you had Gu Lufeng try to kill me? Yet now you also want to slander me in front of Brother Yu. Why do you hate me so much? Little sister Lianing, why you have to say so much to such a person? Just let me go kill him to avenge you. Nie Jinshin had reached his breaking point, and he shouted at Nangongyu. Nangong, you still haven't quickly killed him yet to avenge little sister Lianing. Don't tell me that you really want to see our Lianing that has always been protected since childhood suffer such a grievance? Nangongyu's face twisted upon hearing Nie Jinshin and Feng Lianying's words. The murderous intent within his eyes seemed to condense into a storm, as though at any time he could tear everything apart before his eyes. However, before he could make a move, a red light as sharp as a sword suddenly flew before Hushi. Latching around her waist, it quickly pulled her out of Nangongyu's embrace. Gu Lufeng caught Hushi in the air, then steadily descended to the ground. Shoving Hushi behind him, he coldly said to Nangongyu, Your Highness Hell King, are you really unable to distinguish right from wrong today by being used as a tool by that woman? Get lost. My matter with Sheer has nothing to do with you. Hushi tugged on Gu Liufeng's sleeve, her face cold as she said, Don't meddle again. The person they want to kill is me. This has nothing to do with you and shopkeeper Zhou. Chapter 260. Stay your hand. Although Gu Lufeng said that he had a way to escape, as long as Nangongyu pursued them, in the end she would still be involving them. This being the case, then it was better that she settled it alone with Nangongyu. Anyway, even if he really did want to kill her for his beloved little sister Lianing, it was only killing one person, that's all. Gu Lufeng revealed a reckless and uninhibited smile on his face as he spoke in a clear voice. How could it have nothing to do with us? Today, since I see you as pleasing to the eye, I'm regarding you as my Gu Liufeng's friend. Since we're friends, your matters are naturally my matters too. How could I abandon you here alone? After saying that, he stepped forward a step to block Hushi from view, then said to Nangongyu in a gravelly voice, Dignified Hell King, Do you really want to place your hands on a weak teenager whose strength is so much lower than yours? If this news was to spread, aren't you afraid that you'll become a joke of the whole world? Nan Gongyu's gaze fell on Gu Lufeng. His cold, tyrannical gaze made Gu Liufeng's back tense in a split second. You think you can stop me? Upon saying that, Nan Gongyu raised his right hand. This caused an invisible force to sweep towards Gu Lufeng. Gu Liufeng's complexion changed, and he started working the spiritual power within his body to bring forth his weapon. However, between the span of 2 breaths, his body and spiritual power seemed to be confined by something. There seemed to be a formidable energy encircling him, making him unable to use any spiritual powers. The most frightening thing of all, though, was that his body began to uncontrollably move forward, as if there were invisible hands controlling his body and quickly pulling him towards Nan Gongyu. The next moment, Nan Gongyu's palm suddenly clutched Gu Liufeng's neck. His look was extremely calm compared to a moment ago, but the storm contained within his eyes seemed to be able to destroy heaven and earth. Drops of cold sweat seeped out from Gu Liufeng's forehead. In this very moment, he was clearly aware that the man in front of him really wanted to destroy him. Why are you near her? Why are you standing in between Sheer and I? In this world, anyone who futilely tries to snatch her away from me will die. Having heard that, Gu Lufeng was startled, shock appearing in his eyes. What was the meaning behind His Highness Hell King's words? Wasn't he getting revenge for that black-hearted White Lotus? The hand gripping his throat suddenly tightened, and Nan Gongyu's body exploded with a burst of formidable spiritual pressure and a murderous aura. It seemed that at any second Gu Lufeng would meet with a violent death. Don't do it, young master. Nan Gongyu, stay your hand. 2 voices echoed at the same time. Zhou Yan'an's face was filled with fear and despair. Almost without thinking, Hushi summoned an ice sword to her hand and charged straight towards Nan Gongyu and Gu Lufeng. No matter what, she couldn't involve Gu Lufeng and allow him to die for her in this secret territory. She, Hushi, disliked most the feeling of owing someone else, let alone the price of a life. The ice sword charged straight towards Nan Gongyu, drawing dangerously close to his heart and chilling him to the bone. Nan Gongyu turned around to avoid the attack. With his eyes staring fixedly at her, his icy cold, gloomy voice was filled with hoarse disbelief and heartache as he asked, "You actually want to raise your hand and fight me for another man?" Hushi was engulfed by the swirling storm and pain within his eyes, causing her heart to become stifled as she saw this. "Sheer, tell me, do you really want to attack me for another man?" Hushi's face paled, and the tense grip of her hand around the sword loosened. However, seeing an insidious smile on Feng Lianing nearby, as well as Gu Liufeng's slightly swollen and purple complexion, her expression quickly became cold. "I said before, didn't I? Since Feng Lianing was injured by me, if you want revenge for her, then this has nothing to do with Gu Lufeng." You're tuning in to the Lime's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.